Well, welcome to Wednesday morning and 10 o'clock. And this is a meeting of the city council that's preliminary to, well, it's not preliminary, but it's to set forth the projected budget before any changes are made and to listen to opinions about the direction things may go and to just absorb more information from the department heads. So let's rise and pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you say grace over this meeting?
Father, we come to you in prayer today, and we just ask, Lord, that we be great stewards of the resources and remember that all good things come from you. Help us to live responsibly. Help us to work together and collaborate in a way that's best for all the people that we lead and govern. Help us to be open and listen well. We thank you for your bounty. We know that we reap what we sow. So help us to sow wisely so that our future can reap as well as we have. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Never done a budget, Rick. Again, thank you all for coming. We don't have too many of the public here, but we do have a few. And we want to be very open about this budget and the process that we go through as we adopt it in about a month and a half, 2 months. Month and a half would be stretching it a little probably. So the first person I'm going to call on is Chief of Staff, Jeremy Lawler, and you kind of set the guidelines for what we're going to do today, Jeremy.
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. For the record, Jeremy Lawler with the city. This is essentially your meeting. It's your platform for us to begin the budget discussions. The program is going to be Greg Garitas from FFG is going to go over some of the budget information. There'll be some Q&A there if you have the opportunity or if you have questions. And then after that, you will hear from each of the individual department heads. We are in the process of getting you a summary of their budget changes that they will essentially present to you. So we'll get you that between now and then. It's currently on the printing press. One thing I did want to open up with prior to any of the discussions is with the cost of living for the state of Indiana being close to 10%. We do have or are proposing a 5% increase this year across the board for cost of living, and then the city is suggesting that we absorb the employee share of the benefit increase, so the medical dental increase. It's currently forecasted as being 9% increase. So you will see that in your budget lines of a staff increase of 5%, and then also the 9%. It actually translates into a little bit more than that since we're absorbing that share for all the medical dental expenses. So,
Before Greg starts, Clerk, would you call the roll so we know who is in attendance? Here.
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 Here. Here.
Here. Thank you. Okay.
all right, with that, I'll hand it off to Greg Garitas.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Greg Garitas. I am president of Financial Solutions Group, and look forward to the 2023 budget kickoff. I have a couple, I've put this together, and you're welcome to pass it around. It's just what I'm going to say here briefly, and then I'm going to go through some statistics. And you're welcome to put some notes at the bottom. But good morning and welcome to the kickoff of the 2023 City of Westfield budget. In the budget, we have implemented pay increases, insurance adjustments, and additional personnel where needed. The city continues to experience record growth in both population and assessed value. We're also in a period of inflation pressures on all budget areas. Okay, we got one more, couple more. Each department has addressed their needs through a write-up that will go through in a summary way. Those are given to you now, and they put a lot of work in it. The goal this year was to try and give you as much information up front as we could and kind of share how we got here today. We're also handing out a document by department compiled from OpenGov with assistance showing basically IT's assistance, showing the proposed 2023 budget compared to the 2022 budget and several of the actual years so that you can see budget to actual. Although here in Westfield, having done the sustainability for many, many years, I know that things change very rapidly in some of the line items. The goal today is to educate the council and the public so we get to the point of advertising the budget as the next step and set the maximum budget by fund. The clerk's office and I have spent an entire day going through putting in round one of the Form 1s. We've worked through the miscellaneous revenues on Gateway. We worked through some preliminary Form 4Bs, which is the document that pulls it all together, so to speak. And we've gotten a lot accomplished, Carrie and Misha and I, and we've got a lot accomplished at this point in time. We will tweak it as we go through making a couple more changes, but the goal, again, is to get what we call the Form 3, or the advertisement. That's what we need to submit if we keep our 26th schedule. We need to submit by the 16th. I'd like to really say more like 14th or 15th of September. The process going forward would be to council can review between now and the public hearing date, ask questions of department heads, or request in writing more detail. We'd love to, if you put it in writing, we can respond back in writing or anything like that so that everybody has the information and the same answer. The council can by vote, request cuts or adjustments at the public hearing or at the time of the final adoption. So that's kind of how the process usually works. There's been a lot of work by every department to get this point, and lots of thoughts and consideration put into the 2023 budget. I personally sat down with every department head for over sometimes half an hour or a couple hours, and we went through each line item of the proposal. We have kept the stance that the budget is not improved until the entire process is completed, which includes council's review, Dlgf's final approval, known as the 1782. We still stand by the recommendation we've always had. We recommend the city not hire additional personnel until the 1782 notice is received and reviewed. And it is my understanding that was communicated to department heads. And the point there is a lot of moving parts with the growth quotient, especially here in Westfield, since we have a unique one. And we want to make sure that that gets approved as we're proposing. Finally, I would like to say that over the time that this administration has been involved with the budget process, we have carefully maintained a balance between taxpayers' need for services and the ability of the community to raise revenue. Kind of matching those two things is what I got involved very early at that point, the town of Westfield, when we did the very large annexation and we phased in, first ever phase in of a very large annexation over 3 years, many, many moons ago. So the financial strength of the city, of this great city, is the strongest it's ever been. And our hope is we will continue this way in the future. Now, let me tell you that in my walks and drives around the state of Indiana, a little bit of what I've seen, and I'll compare and contrast you. First of all, as you know, the growth quotient, the non-farm payroll rolling 60-month, is limited to 5% this year. We have a usually we have a two-tiered growth quotient, which we can go up to about 9% because of the legislation that we authored many, many years ago. So hopefully that will allow us to match up the revenues with the expenses and continue onward. There is some concern that that won't be approved, and sometimes it's not by the Dlgf in some locales. So we just got to be flexible as we move forward. So with your AV growth being around 24%, that's one of the largest AVs I've heard growth, and that's countywide in here in Westfield. I would note though that in Hancock, of which I do their budget, it's around 22%, and Hendricks is running about 24%. The farther you get out, if you get to a Shelby County, you're going to see 17%. If you go further out from the donuts, you can go as low as 10% to maybe around 5%. So that's kind of where you set in what I consider the higher upper quartile of the growth in AV. Where do we stand on income taxes? We stand very well. It looks as though we do not have the challenge that we had several years ago, and the challenge like in Boone County last year, they went down 8%. So we have approximately a growth of 22% overall in income taxes in the county. Now, how does that compare and contrast? Again, the donuts are very, very strong. Most of them are running in that way. Actually, I think Hendricks County may be the top of the list this year. And it's basically because of their jobs that they've brought in and overall income. The other, in some locales, we've seen the trust balance go negative. And again, as farther you get out from the donuts and the growth areas, and we've seen people growing 1%. 1% on income tax in some of the rural counties. That's pretty low. Then we see our miscellaneous revenues with the helps of things like building permits and interest income. Clerk's office is doing well there. And so what we see there is approximately a 4.5% growth in miscellaneous income. So that's setting us up well. I consider we have 3 buckets of revenue: property taxes, income taxes, and miscellaneous revenues. And what is miscellaneous revenues? It's all those other things. And we've shown you some of that detail. And if you ever want to see that in one of your public meetings, we can share it. But it is also on Gateway, and it's something that, again, Misha and Carrie and I have worked through. So, yeah, all in all, we're hoping to be able to move forward. We believe we do have a balanced budget. And although we do have the challenges of the additional fire department personnel, which it's my understanding the current number is 12, and we've built that in, so that's a tremendous increase in the public safety area. And so we're working through that very, very methodically, and we've allocated more LIT in order to fund that on an ongoing basis. So there's a little shift in LIT amounts to be able to do that. But again, we've worked with the fire department very carefully to get there. So all in all, I think we've got great fund balances. We've got a good trajectory on our revenues. So I believe that's why we said, let's propose this budget as is at this point in time, and then talk it over, see where we need to go with council's guidance, and then go from there. So department heads have an awesome write-up that we'd like to go through now one by one, unless there's any questions for me in general, but I'll stay around. General questions for me.
What was our assessed value and income tax increases the year before? Do you remember?
I have those in the sustainability, which I do have with me, but not to take up a lot of time, but I'm thinking it was more down around the 5% area, and Counselor, we'll mark that down as a question, and we'll get you the written answer.
Okay.
Keep
thanks.
in mind that I do not take into account in my projections any supplementals, and so the growth would be without the supplemental, and because we can't count on those. We have gotten those over the last couple of years, but I will say on average, it's 2 out of 7 years.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
What's the timeline on the DLGF approval on the growth quotient?
Well, if we stay with this at 26 and we stay with the meeting in October, okay, October for both. If we stay in October and we get it submitted by Halloween, I believe they're all due by Halloween, and so then DLGF will go back into their dark chambers and work it up and throw us out a draft. And the draft is expected in counties where AV has been turned in. So let's talk Hamilton County. More than likely, we'll have that in November and December. A lot of times, if you notice, they came out right before Christmas. And so, you know, Misha and the clerk's office in Cary, they've got us copied on it. They've got you copied on it. They've got Jeremy copied on it. And so we'll know, and that'll be draft 1 subject to review. So hopefully, I'm going to say maybe as late as Christmas, but hopefully before. And again, that's not generally throughout the state because some people haven't even turned in AV. And so if I don't think any of your neighboring counties have not turned in AV, but that could hold up everybody's if there was cross-county units of government. Not you, but it would still hold you up more than. So. Other general questions? Because that's all I've been doing for 2 months now is budgets. So I've seen it all. I've seen health insurance. That, by the way, we're lucky here. I've seen health insurance be as much. I think the AIM Trust is around 12%. I've had one client recently 30%. And so, you know, I had another $1 million baby that it took someone's self-insurance reserve fund down by $1 million after the stop loss. And so there's events like that are going on. We're seeing very, very strong impact on gasoline and things like that. We worked with the department heads, in most cases, doubled those budgets as much as we could. And we also kind of looked at where they were year to date, 6/30/2022. And there may be a few additional appropriations. We're hoping not. A lot of department heads said that they could move within their current budget. But, you know, it's been a tough, I wrote in the county newsletter, it's probably the toughest year ever. But here in Westfield, we're fortunate.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Wait.
Oh,
Okay.
question?
Had a few. What is the overall cost for this 5% across the board cost of living,
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna
then the 9% on the, what's the overall cost in that?
We'll get into some of that with the individual department reports. I don't have that number readily available, the total number, but we'll certainly get that to you.
So we can take that down as item number 2?
Item number 2, yeah.
What are the other communities you work with? How are they handling that? What have their numbers been?
Oh, okay, very good question. So everybody's trying to stay mostly with a strong 4 or 5. There are outliers, there's no doubt about it. Keep in mind, I do a lot of sheriff departments, and because the ISP sheriff increase or our state police increase 2 years ago, everybody's playing catch up. And so I've seen them, we've got some brackets going up as much as 20%. The less fortunate areas that have 1% growth, they're going 2%. So it's a wide range, probably the biggest range I've ever seen. And that catch-up factor, bringing some of the up to date. Now here, remember, we've had our study many, many years, and we've tried to keep updating and keep on track. And I think that served us well, that all of the work that's been done with the Archer study and all of those things.
Did that not have built-in escalators too in the Archer study?
The Archer does not. It's a range, but you may recall every year in the salary ordinance update that you all approve, we do an increase that is similar, if not the same, as our cost of living increase. So those brackets move that way. We're not. So that's not so that way cost of living doesn't push someone out of a pay bracket, because it would over time if you just did the study and then never adjusted it. In a few years, you'd have plenty of people that are outside of their pay bracket. So it adjusts every year with the salary ordinance. So in that ordinance, it goes line by line per position, and you approve a salary range. That adjusted range takes into account the cost of living.
Okay, and we also have two kind of different issues this year, and that's our second ARPA distribution, which has not been appropriated yet, that we just received a few weeks ago. And then, and we pretty much already said that's going to general fund, but it's pretty much committed. And then the $6 million that's going to be repaid of the RDC going back to infrastructure improvement, has that been accounted for?
It has not yet, because we haven't made an official approval of what is going to be done. There's been a couple different conversations. It's accounted for on a separate sheet once you all decide and actually officially approve the resolution, and then subsequently the RDC approves the resolution. We'll pencil that in. So there's some urgency there, so we can get it in prior to budget approval. And then also, if you all want to appropriate those dollars for spend in 2023, we should do that here as well, in this process. But it's not in the sheet that you see.
Okay, I think those things need to be accounted for, though. Moving ahead.
We completely agree.
Now, for the record, we did put ARPA in the gateway system.
Correct.
And we put the second payment in with the clerk's office and just put it in other. Because in that way, it was going through the appropriation process. You can change that or whatever. But we wanted to be at least have all funds in there on round one.
Okay,
And if you recall, so we're talking about two different things. The resolution as presented, meaning you get a payment in December, requires an additional appropriation process. So I need to know exactly how that's going to go before we're either going to plug in $3 million into the RDC budget for 2023 or $6 million into the RDC budget for 2023.
no, it'll be the 6 in the 2023.
Okay, I hadn't heard that, but
That's the way it's going to be rewritten.
okay,
Yeah.
very good. Then we'll get
Okay.
that. We'll get that in there for our next round of revisions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other
And
questions or any way I can help?
Okay. Jeremy, I'll let you call the department heads up in the order you prefer. And
okay, yeah, and I'll open it up a little bit before we go to the department head reports. So in this sheet in front of you, you'll see it's set as highlighted at the top, estimated 2022 and 2023 revenues. So that first page is our revenue forecast for next year. Clearly, this has to be certified by the Dlgf. If you notice at the bottom of the page, total revenue for 2023 is projected at $59 million. This is general fund dollars, $59,258,949. And then if you flip to the back page, our budgeted or proposed budget expenses for 23 is $56,789,946. So we are proposing to spend less revenue than we receive, as it's contemplated. And then that includes the cost of living, and that includes the increase in cost associated with insurance, as well as everything that is going to be described to you by the department heads. So are there questions about that holistic picture before we get into the details?
Hey, Jeremy, just kind of a general question here. So this information, maybe not everything's on here. I mean, these don't obviously equal.
We weren't involved in that report. It came from the clerk. That's an export from OpenGov as of today. So that That is not the, that is the spend up to today, and I haven't had an opportunity to look at it. Correct.
Okay.
And, yeah, so full, when she says full budget, she's talking about non-DLGF related funds as well.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we go on? Okay,
Okay. With that, I'll open up from an administrative perspective, the admin budget this year. So if you turn over to your budget memo packet, we'll start with the top page and just work through that department by department. Notable changes for the admin is mostly associated with salary. Yeah, we're proposing $192,844 in additional salary for 2023. That is primarily based on how my salary was paid for the previous employee. I'm not a merit firefighter, so I cannot be paid by the fire department. So that moves more than 50% of that salary over to admin, to the general fund. And then as you move down through that, you'll see the other chunk of that is there is a $59,000 for a payout for vacation rollover. So we had an employee that was allowed to accumulate quite a bit of vacation time over their tenure here. It came up in the audit last year, and as I understand it, the desire is to go ahead and rectify that, pay that money that is owed out, and then prevent that from ever happening again. And that's what we are committed to. And then there's also some money in that salary line for an intern for the 2023. So a paid intern position to help in the finance department. And then below that, you'll see some additional appropriations, and that's really not for today's conversation, but I did want to put it in front of you. Because of that position change, we'll need to do some additional appropriations, salary and benefits for the admin line coming up soon, along with some additional appropriations for legal and some other things. But you don't need to spend time on that today unless you want to. And with that, I will start through the other departments, and they'll come before you and give you an update, and unless you have questions for me.
any questions for Jeremy? Okay, let's go ahead.
Okay, and first up is the police department.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
For the record, Joel Rush, Chief of Police. And I'm not sure what you're looking at. Do you have the 23 budget memo for the police?
Yeah.
Okay. I plan on just kind of going through that a little bit. These are what we consider our notable increases from 22 to 23. Under the salary portion, the new staffing, promotions, that's $351,000. As Greg alluded to, you know, we're one of the fastest growing cities in Indiana. I think it's important that we keep our staffing up. And we do that on a planned strategic basis. So we're asking for 3 police officers for 23. And unless things change, that's probably going to be kind of a stamped thing for the next several years, unless the economy goes one way or the other, and we'll adjust. But we're kind of looking for 3 per year, just so you know. Really, it's pretty easy. There's many different ways that we calculate staffing. But the most important one is that we continue to give the service that the community's used to receiving. And we feel that 3 is a good number for us. With that, with all the, as you can read for yourself, with all the, it's $186,000 for the base positions for 3, and then all the add-ins with the health, FICA, PERF, and even up to uniforms and equipment. The whole total add is the $351,000. Any questions about that? I can continue to move on. Do you see the 77 per fund? Just a couple sentences about that. The city pays 17.5 currently percent per officer that's under the 77 pension plan. That is calculated by the state, and it's moving to 18% next year. So the addition will be just over $20,000 for that. So other notable changes, fuel. We were looking at 21 when calculating for 22, and we were using the number $2.69 per gallon. As we all know at the pumps, we're feeling it, and we're feeling it as a department also. That's one of those lines that will probably be in the red unless we can utilize some of our other lines for that. We had $226,000 budgeted for 22, and we're getting close to that already. Those numbers are basically doubling, and it's we actually utilize the bus garage. It's a co-op when we buy fuel with the schools. We're calculating $5 per gallon right now and using that as a figure for 23. That's why that's such a big number, 444,000 for next year. If we were to have any wiggle room, this may be the area to do it, but it's kind of a guessing game, to be honest. So we feel this is a good number for next year.
I wanted to ask about the schools utilize co-op, which is over there. Do they receive additional charges on top of the fuel, like delivery charges or something like that in a time like this? I noticed that's been a standard business practice of like some of the co-ops around here, where we're getting hit with an extra charge on top of the actual cost of the fuel.
Quite honestly, I would think you would need to talk to the school about that. They give us, I'm guessing it's built into the price that they charge us for the fuel. The big savings there is the avoidance of fuel tax.
Okay. So. Who would be the person to talk to at the school about that?
Joe Montalone is the head of facilities and vehicles and things of that nature.
Okay.
And otherwise, Brian Michael, I'm sure could probably provide you with some info on that.
Yeah, we're invoiced by the school as a city, and I see just our portion of it. At the beginning of the year, we were looking at probably $6,000 an invoice, and we're up to about 20 right now. So
I talked to quite a few
increase.
farmers from time to time, and they say this is the fuel's good, it's good fuel, but they're getting bit with some extra charges right now.
So moving on to vehicles for 2023, we're requesting to add 10 police vehicles and the related equipment for a total of 588,100. Last year was 530. And equipment, we're requesting to purchase weapons, tasers, as part of our new obsolescence strategy, phasing in, upgrading, and replacement of existing equipment. Equipment for an additional 2 officers to be placed on our ESU team. That's a co-op team with Noblesville. That's got a price tag of just uniforms, equipment, helmets, things like that, at $20,000. The taser replacement cost is $34,000, and granted, that's obsolescence strategy, so that's not all of our officers to be done at one time. That's about a fourth of our officers at one time. A lot of this equipment, some of these guns, some of these tasers, were here when I got here. And I've been here almost 13 years now. So it's important to come up with a strategy to replace those. Obviously, we can't replace everybody's at one time. So, you look at 4 or 5 years to replace those. A breakdown of the actual weapons, because I know that's always a consideration. The $27,000 of that 47 are backups, weapons for new officers. We have 4 weapons that go to each officer, and the 3 new officers, that's calculated into that price. Backups, unfortunately, we live in the day that anything can happen. It's important that you have some backup weapons, and we really don't at this point. So when an officer would have to get into an altercation, have to fire his weapon, and it becomes an investigation, those weapons are taken and they're processed just like anybody else's would be. It's important that you don't take a gun from an officer without replacing it. So it's important to have a few of those on your shelves in inventory for that, unfortunately, if that ever happens. 4,500 of it is just other equipment. When you purchase these weapons, they come with lights, they come with slings, they come with extra magazines and things like that. $15,000 of that 47 is the obsolescence strategy for our current patrol rifles. So again, it's about a fourth of the department at one time instead of all of them at once. And that's really the main increases. I can get into the weeds with things if necessary. Scott and I are both available at any time to meet one-on-one or small groups to go over. I mean, there's a lot here, so we could probably talk for hours on some of this stuff. But these are the highlights of increases.
Joel?
Chief.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Chief, I was just going to ask, any more articulation about the 10 vehicles and the strategy?
It's
More clarity for us about the number 10 and the need.
Sure, and again, we do this with a lot of thought. As Greg mentioned, I have a team of people. Scott is a big part of that. I don't look at the vehicles every day, but I have people that do. So we come together as a team, and this is the number we came up with. We have currently somewhere in the neighborhood of mid-70s as far as vehicles. So you take 10 a year, you take up to 13 a year, and because we're stretching the amount of time we're keeping these vehicles. It used to be when I first got here, we keep a car 3 years and then get rid of it. Now it's some of the vehicles we're keeping 6, 7, 8 years. So it just depends on the mileage. It depends on the maintenance of the vehicle, and they monitor all that. So the 10 basically puts us in a good sweet spot to where we're not maintaining the vehicles every day, but they're good vehicles. So, sure.
Yeah, hey, and this may go to Jeremy. So I'm just trying to tie out the numbers, that you're talking about. So for instance, like where are the vehicles at, and where's the equipment at? Because I can't tie any of it out to that specific line.
In the actual worksheet form.
Yeah,
So the vehicles,
I won't ask everybody.
Vehicles and equipment are under the equipment line.
yeah, so if you go, I was just looking at it. I
It should be a
apologize.
$700 and some $1,000 number.
Yeah, so where it says police dash equipment under the 2, it looks like it's the 7th line down.
754,
Yeah,
939.
754, up from 530 of last year.
Well, and the 530 is not an accurate number because there's other budgeted items in that
In that line.
to
Okay.
add, yeah.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out. I'm trying to tie the numbers out. So for instance, like when we said, I wasn't really focused on the vehicles, I just, like the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, well, the equipment, the proposed increase, 107, 189. And so I go to, police equipment. And obviously maybe there's other things in there.
There is.
Okay.
What happened, Troy, was when last year we added what used to be bonded out into a line that had other items in it, if that makes sense. That's why
Yeah.
it's a bigger number. So when you look at the 530 from the previous year, it was actually 530 plus another probably 58,000.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like adding it up, and it only gives you $70,000 for other things. If I add up everything, it doesn't come up to that number, 754. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to beat you up on this at
Yeah.
all. I'm just trying to make sure. I mean, like when I see the numbers, I always like to tick and tie them out and say, where's that number going into?
Understood, and the details of all that are in OpenGov. OpenGov seemed to add confusion last year, so we decided to go this route in a more simpler form. But in OpenGov, if you cross-reference that amount to the actual appropriation line, you can expand it, and the itemized dollars are defined underneath there that total up to the 754.
Hey, Chief, how many backup weapons do you guys keep in inventory?
How many what?
Backup weapons?
Right now, we may have one or two at the most.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, you're right.
So, we have 10 vehicles, $558,000. If I go from that equipment and,
It's
I went
550
from 530 to 754, then we're not accounting for other things or something. I'll go into OpenGov.
So it's 550, it's 588 for the vehicles,
Okay, yeah, 588. Okay, sorry, I apologize.
which is, vehicles are actually 423,100. And the installation and other equipment for those vehicles is 165 to get to that number. And then you're adding on another 166,000 for the weapon systems we talked about and the tasers and all that. So it's all in the equipment and vehicles are all into one line, which totals the 700 and whatever number you had.
Okay. I mean, we just got these last night, so that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
I did not, haven't had time to go into OpenGov, so I won't keep asking every department head. That's just, you just get to
Well,
be the
and-
lucky one.
We have a breakdown of every penny in a different format, and I'd be glad to share that with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go into OpenGov, because I just want to see everything tying out from this into OpenGov where I can see what our increases are. I'm not opposed to any of it, I just want to see it.
Yeah, understandable, and again, we're trial and error on this a little bit, and if there's a specific format y'all would like to see at the
But
next
this is fine,
next meeting, we can work on that.
this is fine.
Okay.
Not to be a jerk about the earlier, obviously.
Correct, yeah, I understand.
Any other questions for Chief Rush? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next up is Kevin Todd with the Community Development Department. I will note before Kevin starts, there is a typo on this, so as you're going down that spreadsheet, it says 3-fire. As we were filtering, the fire fund is 203, so it tagged the wrong name in there, but below those expenses where it says ECD, that's everything Kevin is talking about between the 3 and the 5.
Yeah, I am not asking for fire's budget. Good morning. For the record, Kevin Todd, Community Development Department Director. First of all, I just wanted to kind of start off with kind of a brief update regarding the status of the Community Development Department. We asked for a few more positions this time a year ago. I just wanted to give you an update on where we are on that. For most of the 2022 calendar year, we've been fully staffed, so I'm happy to say that. This has allowed us the ability to start working on some of the things that have been on our to-do list for quite some time, such as some amendments to our Unified Development Ordinance, some updates to our Plan Commission process, some other long-range planning and data management and organization and presentation stuff that you guys have seen some of that this year already. So thank you for that. We've been able to accomplish some of those things. Our goal is to continue to do even more of that moving forward. So when I say fully staffed, what does that look like? Just kind of a quick snapshot of our team. So it not only includes myself, but we have 6 full-time planners. We have 4 full-time building inspectors, a building commissioner, 2 community development coordinators, which that's kind of a unique position to us that includes both permit review responsibilities as well as code enforcement responsibilities, and we have 2 administrative staff. So as you may recall, again, as I mentioned last year, as part of the budget approval process, there was a position that was funded for basically half of this year. One of the new positions was essentially a half of a year position. Could start as early as July this year. I've postponed filling that position because we really haven't needed it so far this year. But as you can see in the memo, I am requesting to keep that position in my budget proposal for 2023. I think as we get further and further into some of these extra non-day-to-day planning exercises that we're doing, like the UDO updates and some of the plan reviews and things like that, not development plan reviews, but comp plan initiatives and things like that, I think we will need another person probably next year at some point. But in 2022, we ended up not needing that person. So you'll see that in the memo request is to keep that and make that a 12-month position for 23. But looking further into the future, beyond 2023, I am anticipating we'll need to add folks over time, possibly as early as 24, a new position in addition to the one that I just spoke about. And when and if we do that, we won't have anywhere to put them in our office. We're pretty well maxed out on office space. So in my 23 proposal, I would like to build out one of our conference areas, turn that into offices for when we do add people in the future, we will have a place to put them. So that's I think it's maybe the 3rd bullet item in your memo there. Is a construction, but a one-time construction build out of that space, converting conference space into office space, in addition to some basic furnishings for those offices. One other notable change, I don't know that this is on your memo or not, but I think it's not. I am proposing to reduce our consulting budget by $30,000 for next year, from 60 to 30. We don't have any anticipated need for planning consulting in 23. We do have an on-call consultant that we will retain, but frankly, we haven't needed that service very much this year because we are better staffed, and I don't anticipate needing that next year very much either, but in the event that something comes up, I think we would like to have a little bit budgeted. And then lastly from me, in looking at our total revenue projections for next year of all of the different revenue sources that community development covers, we're anticipating or projecting that the total revenue generated by community development be $2.4 million. That's a slight increase from what our budget projections were for this year. And I guess I'd just like to touch on a couple of the reasons why I think that is. While yes, I think we are anticipating a little bit of a dip in the economy next year, really so far to date, we haven't felt that. So I think it'll be manageable if and when we do start to feel that hit in the economy and the housing market. I think we'll still be in really good shape. I think we'll still have a lot of productivity there. So I am anticipating that our building permit revenues increase slightly. Some of our other fees may reduce slightly as a result of the economy, but at the end of the day, I think it will end up in a slight increase. I think part of that reason too is we've been very conservative in our projections the last several years. We've probably underestimated by about 40% what we've actually been receiving in revenues. So this is probably a little more true of what we can probably anticipate, even in the event of a downturn in the economy. I think this 2.4 is probably a pretty reasonable number. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I also would like to just kind of note for the record, I mean, that our $2.4 million in revenues not only really kind of covers the cost of running the community development department. We're asking, I think, for a $1.9 million budget. But the excess, if you want to think of it that way, also goes to help cover a lot of the other departments that help us do our jobs. So that's how I view it.
Any questions for Kevin?
Just one. I know that it's been an issue over the course with the code enforcement, and I know that we are a complaint-based code enforcement kind of place, if you will, and we don't have anyone actively going out and doing that on a full-time basis. Is that ever your plan to put someone on that?
That would have to be a policy change in how we approach code enforcement. So yes, if that's the desire of the administration and the council, whomever, to reevaluate how we handle code enforcement as a more proactive approach, then yeah, we may need to look at those positions differently.
Okay, but we have two people that can be doing,
Well, that's not their only job. They do a
Right.
lot of permit reviewing and sign permits and building permits and a lot of things. But yes, we do currently have two, and we can figure out how to split that work up differently if we needed to. But it may
okay,
include.
but they do handle the complaints when they come in? Or is it
That's correct.
actually our planning staff who are handling
No,
it?
well, it starts with code enforcement folks, depending on the nature of the complaint. If it gets into a zoning violation, they'll pull in a planner to have that conversation on maybe what the best approach is to handle that particular case. But by and large, if it's a nuisance complaint, tall weed and grass complaint, trash and debris, I mean, the code enforcement folks are handling that without a planner.
Just a side note, I know, and it's something that just bugs me, so I have to bring it up. You know, we have standards like you have to have the doors closed on dumpsters, for instance. And I can tell you at least 80% of those with the gates on the dumpsters have them open. For the life of me, I can't understand why we keep allowing it. And yet it remains our standard, and we're not enforcing it. So there's just some things like that that I find kind of troubling, that here we have a standard, but we're not enforcing it. And I get a lot of comments from the public about different things like where is the enforcement? People don't want to be calling in every problem they see necessarily. And so I think it's something as we move forward, we really ought to be considering how we tackle that moving forward, where we don't put that burden on citizens to keep reporting things that are violations.
Yeah, that's a good conversation. I think a broader conversation that needs to occur.
And the only thing I would add to that is the two folks that do this full-time just on a complaint basis are pretty well covered up. So if you want to do more of a policing of code enforcement things, we certainly talk about that. It would require that add additional staff to do that, at least one person to be proactively finding the problems and then carrying those through a resolution. So
Yeah,
if you want to add a couple people to that group, then we can talk about
I
that.
think we'd want to be selective on the types of things that we're proactively looking for. I mean, not just driving through neighborhoods looking for sheds that are 2 feet over the property line. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of.
Oh, I
that
realize the
feel-
reasonable part of that, and that makes sense. But again, these broader things, I think we either need to be changing our UDO to accommodate the actual situations or enforcing them, one of the two. I mean, just to have these things out there that aren't being enforced, you know, and chronic problems, I think need to be solved.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk through that more.
Any other questions for Kevin? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up, we have Kayla Arnold from our Westfield Welcome Department, or Parks, as you'll see it on your sheet here.
Thank you, counselors. For the record, Kayla Arnold, Director of Westfield Welcome. Like Kevin, I'll give a little bit of background. Westfield Welcome has hosted more than 30 events as of today for 2022, including our new Movies in the Plaza series, which has seen more than 1,000 people come to Grand Junction Plaza, to events like Westfield Rocks the Fourth, which welcomed more than 12,000 people to Grand Park over 2 days. We still have about 10 to 12 events left for the year. We've also co-hosted several events with the Downtown Westfield Association, including Party on the Plaza and the Market Concert Series, in conjunction with their Thursday evening farmers market. We've welcomed 201 new residents as of today through our new resident program and coordinated nearly 2,000 hours of volunteer service through our events and through Colts Training Camp. We do that with a staff of 2 full-time community event coordinators, 1 part-time community event coordinator, and 1 hospitality and volunteer coordinator, as well as myself. For my 2023 budget, I am seeking to add an additional full-time community events coordinator. I'm requesting to promote a current employee from part-time to full-time, which would expand their duties and the number of events that they handle. I would then backfill that part-time position with a new employee. I'm also proposing 5 part-time seasonal employees for Grand Junction Plaza to manage and coordinate the ice ribbon in the winter of '23. The total expense for the part-time positions would be $15,500, and the remainder of the skating season, which is proposed to end January 29th, 2024, would be budgeted in the '24 budget. I'm requesting a 2.23% increase in the current operating budget. While the promotions line has a 21% increase, there have been significant decreases in the service line at 43% and the equipment line at 65%. We've been asked to account for a nearly 30% increase, or $8,000, in our fireworks line item for Westfield Rocks the 4th when we discussed this with our vendor. As you can imagine, the cost of goods has increased and this industry was also affected. This increase will ensure that we have the same quality and length of show that we have in the past and that the city is known for. We also recategorized $25,000 from the service expenses to promotions, as it's a better alignment for what is being purchased. We've also been able to realign event budgets that are funded through this process. A number of events at Grand Junction Plaza were budgeted at $50,000 each for 2022. As we've worked through those events this year and are planning for the remainder of them, we've been able to scale that back in an effort to add more programming and new initiatives next year. So some of those events could include a concert series, programming and events with the ice ribbon, and additional programming at the plaza, which would expand our Workout Wednesday series, creek stomps, plant and species identification, and a kids concert series at the Wetland Amphitheater. Another line that has a slight net increase is the subscriptions and dues line. We've always had these subscriptions and dues, which would include Sign Up Genius, music licensing, and SurveyMonkey, but they've never been specifically accounted for in the budgeting process. In the past, they've been paid out of the subscription line or the promotions line, so this move would ensure that they're properly expensed in the correct category. We're also exploring a new volunteer management software. The program that we currently use is focused on donor management as opposed to volunteer management. So if we choose to move forward with that software, we would be able to cancel 2 other subscriptions that are in that line item, which would result in a reduced net increase than what's proposed. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
What did you say about the farmer's market initially? Right when you
Just that we assist with the market concert series that's held on the first Thursday evening of the farmer's market of each month.
Okay.
Did I hear you say creek stomp?
Yes.
What is that?
We actually did 2 of them this year. It is with our plaza coordinator, John, and it is literally kids getting in the creek, identifying different plants that are down there, species, and any kind of critters that may be in the creek as well.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry.
The kids enjoyed it.
Okay. Okay, so the Grand Junction, the promotions, I'm sorry, the promotions line item of $361,500.
Yes.
What is all in that $361,500?
So that would include,
Sorry.
that's fine. That would include fireworks, monies for Westfield Rocks the 4th, Lantern Days, Cuisine Connect Culture, Westfield and Lights, Pumpkin Function, various marketing and items that we would purchase in conjunction with those events. And that also would include those new events and initiatives, so concert series and additional programming.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is because, and I apologize, I can't remember, but last year during the budget process, which you weren't involved in.
I was not.
Yeah, right. So the 299.5 was supposed to be things that we were buying fencing and we were buying other things that we weren't going to have recurring next year. In fact, I specifically remember we said it's a one-time event, and then next year we won't have those expenses.
So those expenses were in the equipment line. So we had, so those were tents, barrier fencing, things like heaters for any winter events that we might do at the plaza. So that was one of the lines that had a 65% decrease.
Where's that at?
Last line on parks.
What, on the second page?
I'm looking here. Yes.
So Troy, on the sheet that we handed out,
Oh, you're looking at the big one.
oh,
Sorry.
the sheet we handed out there, looks like about 12 down. There's an expense of 15,000 for parks equipment. That is down
Which-
from the
Which one are you
previous
looking at,
42.
Jeremy? I'm sorry.
This one that we handed you. I'm not familiar with the big one.
Okay, okay. And I'm sorry, what line?
So when you go start at the parks there where it says 5 Westfield Welcome, there's a large gap and you'll see a $15,000 expense under parks equipment. Last year it was 42.5. It's been reduced to 15 for 2023
Yeah,
for those things that were purchased.
okay. So, and I'm not, I'm just asking questions, okay? So, the parks promotion is going up then by, 62,500, and yes, that is going down by 27,000. But again, I'm just gonna reiterate, last year, I distinctly remember us saying that this is a one-time expense, that we had to buy some things, and then we're going the other way. Now, truthfully, I'm not judging, I'm just saying, I just remember that conversation that we distinctly said,
From my understanding, that was items related to the equipment line.
yeah, and those equipment purchases were $150,000 to $200,000 because we were talking about fencing and all kinds of things, because we had to have our own fencing because we didn't want to use Grand Park's fencing, and so we bought our own. You remember that conversation?
I do, not,
Anybody-
not.
you guys
not-
remember that?
Not in depth, but I do remember some of that. We can get back with you on those things. I think the increase in promotions is associated with added events that will be going on in downtown and throughout the city.
Yeah.
We'll dig into where those
Okay.
equipment-related dollars.
I mean, I know it's not that big of a number. I mean, I'm just kind of curious. And then, secondly, so I met with Steve Latour from the DWA, and we were talking about, what they do. And some of the things that they were charged to do that we were paying them for were actually incorporated into what Westfield Welcome is currently doing. And so now they're doing the farmer's market, et cetera. And they're using less than a half of a full-time person to do those things from supposedly their efficiencies and that sort of thing. So if we approve this, can you absorb the farmer's market and the party on the patio and incorporate that into the Grand Junction?
I think that's probably a discussion worth having. I think it would depend upon if that full-time person was approved that we're requesting to bump that part-time to full-time and then backfill that part-time position. Just because that is such a recurring event that takes place, that would take a lot of staff hours to get everything prepared.
Yeah, well, they're doing it with actually minimal staff hours. So that's why I mean, when we had this discussion, and I'm just bringing this up, that when we were sitting there and you said, well, we have to hire 2 people, and I'm thinking, why do we have to hire 2 full-time people if DWA is doing it with actually a third of a person full-time, and they're able to operate those things? Why can't we do the same thing in Westfield Welcome?
So the reason they are able to do that is because we supplement them extensively. So Kayla's involved and really Chris McConnell and the Public Works or Parks team are heavily involved in those things as well. The farmer's market for sure. So the reason they can do it with a third of a person is because we're doing some of that heavy lifting for them.
Well, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Then why would it take us 2 people to do it?
I don't think it would take 2 people.
Okay.
I'm not requesting 2 people.
So I
Yeah.
misspoke because I don't really know what it takes.
Oh, okay, okay, all right. That's all I want to know.
Kayla, you're asking for one person. You're saying you're
Correct.
gonna move the part-time to a full-time. And
Correct,
then hire a new part-time.
correct.
Any other questions?
Kayla, we get asked sometimes about questions on the role of sponsorships to pay for Westfield Welcome events.
Sure.
And any role that sponsorships could have, and then therefore the recruiting of sponsors. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So we do work with various sponsors for different events. Those funds are able to fund events that are not funded through the general fund. So we do events, additional events like our Barktoberfest, Eggpalooza, our mother-son and daddy-daughter dances. So a lot of supplemental programs that we're able to pay for through those sponsorships and revenues that we receive. And that is solicited through, mostly through myself, but my staff is also involved in that sponsorship process.
Do you feel, I mean, to build on that question, so if we're gonna spend $62,000, for example, on fireworks, I mean, sometimes we get asked, well, have they pursued a sponsor so that it's the, Chick-fil-A, Westfield Rocks the 4th, and we get the 62 grand from them, and then we don't budget it? These are questions we get that are good
Sure.
questions, I think. So, but we understand that Westfield Welcome, that may not be in your purview of your current job, but maybe that's something we need somewhere within the city in terms of chasing down sponsorships to help your budget.
Sure.
Or maybe it needs to be part of your job. I mean, any question or any comments on that?
Sure. So we've, through our sponsorships and revenue, this year we've been able to secure about $130,000. So that does go to, for example, in the 101 general fund, Westfield Rocks the 4th is budgeted for $40,000 for the event, excluding the fireworks. That does not cover the cost of to put the event on. So those monies from sponsorships that we get help offset that cost so that we can have the festival that everyone has come to know.
But you're the one out there securing those sponsorships right now.
Correct.
Can I ask
Is-
a question? Oh, I'm sorry, Jake, I thought you were done.
Yeah, no, I should be. I'm just asking, so is there more opportunity to improve or grow in that area, as in we could secure more sponsorships? But if so, I mean, maybe that's what an added person could help with. Maybe that another department in the city needs to help with that. Maybe not. Maybe that's just not your job. And your job's running the events, not seeking out sponsorships.
Mm-hmm. So there is, if you go across different municipalities, it's all done very differently. So one of our, sister cities to the east has a full-time community development manager who is actively seeking sponsorships, and that is 100% of what their job is. That is just a portion of what I'm capable of doing because I do have a staff to manage, make sure that all of our events go off without a hitch, and so it's just a portion of what I do. I would always welcome more help to be able to secure some of those things and help offset those costs.
How much do they bring in?
Our sister city?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure I can ask or find out that
I'd
number.
be curious to know that.
What do you think our potential is? What do you think our cap is? You said 130 is what we're getting right now, roughly?
Roughly.
Your sponsorship?
Mm-hmm.
Is
That also includes revenue from events like Melt the Trail and Grand Run, which are fee-based.
Okay. So the sponsorship is actually less than 130
Correct.
by a reasonable amount.
Mm-hmm. Probably, I would say between the 90 and
Is that
100,000.
something that we could double, triple and again, I'm not saying throw this on your plate. You've got a full plate. I get that. But is that a number where you think we could double that number or triple that number?
I'm sure if we had the right person in that role that was focused on that, we could probably get up to the doubling. I would probably be a little more conservative off the bat, but I do know that there is money out there, and there are a lot of businesses that sponsor a variety of different things throughout Central Indiana. So I think it's possible.
I think we got to temper, before we get off that subject, we got to temper the realities of Westfield though too. I mean, Noblesville has a lot more corporate tax base and businesses that are willing to throw money into the kitty than
Sure.
what we see here in Westfield. So I think there's something we need to keep in mind as we look at those.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
I just had a question about this ice rink, and I don't think it's even really ice, right? It's a synthetic.
Correct.
And so because we've never done this yet, do we have the costs involved with that and how we're going to have the revenue? Why do we need 5 people there to manage it?
Sure.
So I think John will talk a little bit more about the ice rink when that comes as a part of the Public Works Department. But yes, we do have an estimated cost. 5 people is what we established as the appropriate number of folks to be able to monitor the ice, to be able to rent out skates, maintain the ice, and et cetera. But John will come with some more information later.
It's not that much money, I mean, so it really probably doesn't matter, but, I mean, can that be just done in conjunction, though, with the cafe and whoever's renting it? And, I mean, that'd be
That
that
is
part of
the-
the agreement?
Yeah, that is the goal, is to
That way
have
we don't
some
have to
sort of
extend it.
management agreement with whoever's in that facility, but that has also been our largest obstacle of finding a tenant that is willing to do that. It's not really what coffee shops or cafes do. So I think we would still need to subsidize staff, but the operation certainly of rental and everything else would be ran out of the cafe building.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Next is economic development. Kai Chuck.
Good afternoon, councilors. For the record, Kai Chuck, Economic Development Director. The only main increase in the budget for economic development is for our membership in the Indy Chamber. The chamber actually quotes our subscription costs on our population at $1 a head. So based off of that calculation, we increased our budget to address that issue. I know there's some discussion on trying to negotiate that down, but that's ongoing currently. But to cover the cost of that, anticipated cost for next year, we adjusted our budget for that. The only other increased costs that we anticipate are from other subscriptions. Basically, they're subscriptions for economic development-based associations. And then also subscriptions to our database of sites that we are responsible for. But those are the main cost increases in economic development budgets. The other line items, we have some grants to cover increased costs associated with that we received in 2019. Because of COVID, those funds were not utilized, so those funds are still outstanding that we can utilize for other needs.
Good. Any other questions for Kai?
I have one small one. I see that you have this $5,500 promotions line, and can you tell me exactly why you might need that?
Promotions is mainly for gifts for potential investors in the city. When they come visit the city, we usually give them some sort of gift that represents the city of Westfield. Usually it's usually an executive level type of gift, since the executive levels are the type of level that visits the city for potential investment. So that's what the line of the promotions are. It's separate from the traditional sort of gifts that we hand out in terms of marketing and maybe for Grand Park or Westfield Welcomes. It's a little bit higher level to represent the visitors.
Okay, I just noticed that we haven't actually used that in 20 or 21 really, so it was seemingly like something we might not need.
Well, we had some leftover gifts. That's why we didn't reorder. Because of COVID, not a whole lot of companies visited us during that time frame. But we could, if you would like, we could either not use it or move it somewhere else within the budget.
Okay, I just was interested to know where that was going.
That question actually prompted a thought in my mind, and I apologize, I'm just gonna follow up on that. Did I hear you say we had leftover gifts, so you would buy those in advance, is what you're saying?
Yeah, we bought those in advance in 2019, 2020. So we had some leftover gifts. We don't have a whole lot left. That's just, based off of the visitors that come to Westfield.
Okay. Thank you.
Kai, how many people are in your department?
Just one, myself.
Any other questions for Kai? Thank you, Kai.
Thank you, Kai. Now the moment we've all been waiting for, Chris Larson with the Informatics Department.
That makes one of us, Jeremy. Appreciate that. Chris Larson with the Informatics Department here at City of Westfield, in charge of all forms of technology throughout the city. And what I have before you in my memo is just some of the notable changes in certain lines. There's a lot of changes in the salary line. One of the main ones is a new GIS individual. So as a city, we currently have one person that does all of our creation, analysis, and then maintenance of our GIS data, which is not like any other city around us that is growing as much as us, or is even in the donut counties or cities. So this person is going to come in and hopefully offload a lot of the tedious tasks that take place under the GIS manager and allow that person to really focus on improvement of that data, of the analysis, and keeping our products up to date. We have a really great relationship with the county and the other cities on a GIS level from sharing data, and it's really going to free up some time for them to do that. Also, it helps with coverage of vacations, PTO. There are many times, unfortunately, we can't provide the level of service that we would like to, not only to the city, other departments, but also people who are requesting information from us. And so this person will be able to help cover with that. So you see,
This is an addition.
this is an additional employee, yes, specifically to the GIS section of informatics. So you see the base salary there is $55,000, and then the benefit package. Another big part of our salary line is a promotion that we are seeking. This is to take Adam Green in our department and move him to a role he's been training for as a business analyst. And one thing he's really passionate about is finding efficiencies and making technology work better for us throughout the city. And we're hoping to put him in a position as we work with public safety, police, and fire, our two largest departments, and we assist them on a daily basis with a lot of the technical issues they have, but they have a lot of software and that they have incorporated over the years, and we really want to help them get the most out of those products. And so we're actually want to kind of move Adam in that role where he's stationed within those departments to a degree on a regular basis, and can help evaluate that and help them implement any new those technologies and any other new technologies that are coming down the pipeline. So with that, it's going to take a certain amount of responsibility and autonomy that we're going to place on him. He'll still report to me in the informatics department, and he'll still help with a lot of informatics projects as they come out. But we really want to make those two departments as best as they can be technology-wise. And we really can't do that unless we got somebody working in the ranks and learning, right in line with firefighters and police officers. So, other things, we increased our operations supplies. This is mainly toner and printer heads for giant maps that we print. It looks really large because it's an increase, but it's a line item we typically run out of. So we want to make sure that we're just covering the cost of all that has gone up, because it's all made in China and it takes forever to get over here. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Other things, we had a large increase to our computer equipment line. This mainly stems from a project for our critical cooling in our data center. So we have a data center that exists in a public safety building, and that unit is getting very old. It's approaching end of life, which means it needs to be replaced, because if that goes down, the heat in that room rises very quickly, and then we can have a lot of issues with systems going down. We do have a hybrid environment here at the City of Westfield, so we do have systems that are cloud-based, but we still have a lot of stuff that is on-prem, and that is for easier control and better security, we feel. So a large portion of that increase in there is that for the unit, and it's not even the full cost. It is to hopefully start the process next year, and there will be an additional cost in the year after. There are some things that are up in the air about that, like what's happening with the public safety building and things like that, but this is just to help buffer ourselves. Worst case scenario, we end up getting a second backup unit in there to maintain until we know what change is coming down the line, but this is just kind of a start to that. We've also seen an increase in employees here at the city. There's obviously asks today from other departments, and some of the equipment costs are to handle those new employees coming in, technology that they will need. The equipment line, which I know is similar, is actually a focus on our security. So it's our camera security and our door security. And we've just seen an increase across the board on the cost of those. All of them have a chip in them, and those rates are going up. Also, you never know when the government's going to say, hey, you can't use this manufacturer because it's based in China, even though the other ones are still made in China, but you can't use that one. So, and then you have to switch vendors, and that can be costly. And then we just have a slight decrease you'll see in some lines. Software and services, there are a couple of products we're not going to be utilizing anymore. We're moving away from them and finding better solutions, or at least least expensive solutions. But the reason you don't see a huge dip in those is because of those increased employees. Every employee has licensing that we have to supply, and every time we add another employee, there are services that go by number of users. And so we just have to make sure that we're tracking that growth and handling those costs as they come. So, any questions?
Go ahead.
I've got one, and it's not a big line item, but I'm just curious on the travel, training, and seminars.
Mm-hmm.
We've got $30,000 budget there. Looking at years past, I think the high water mark was 14,800 and some change. With and moving forward, I would assume one thing that we've learned over the last couple of years is that an awful lot of the training that we used to do in person and that type of thing is done virtually. It's done remotely. Is that 30,000? I mean, is that something that you pretty etched in stone there that you need that 30,000, or is that something that we can look at maybe a smaller budget number there?
Potentially, yes, we could. One of the reasons that I didn't adjust it is we did have we had a new person start this year that was approved in this year's budget, and they're going to be involved in training. And then if we get another GIS person, this is one of the benefits that we provided them, is they are able to sign up for conferences or online training and to handle those things. And yet, yes, my team hasn't always utilized all of those funds, so it could be something we could look at to make a little bit more accurate. And there is a lot of online training. We have found in the past the conferences, which are a little bit more costly because you have to send them there and they have to stay and whatnot, but they do get a lot more out of that. And I've been encouraging my team to do that more, especially after COVID, when most conferences were either canceled or they didn't attend. So
you do see that maybe sort of picking up a little bit then?
Yes, but I don't think that we would need any more funds in that line for sure. So.
Okay.
I just have a really quick question on the cooling thing, and again, I'm fine with it. I don't care, but with companies, I mean, it's mainly cloud-based redundancy. Are there cities that are doing the same thing so that way they don't have the same issues as this? So we have, where we need, a data server room, cooling, et cetera. I mean, it just seems like, in this day and age, most people or at least businesses are moving away from that,
Yeah, they're moving to a lot of cloud-based things, and even still, many cities, at least in this area, still have data centers, and they have multiple data centers. And what happens is, even if you offload all of our stuff that we have now into the cloud, you end up incurring a bunch of service fees.
Sure.
And so we could do an analysis to see what it would cost to offset that. We have been under a pretty reasonable maintenance agreement under our current system, and it's lasted us over 10 years, so this is kind of our first major
Yeah.
overhaul to it, so.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean,
yeah.
like, we used to have a data room, and we had a cooling thing in there, and we had all the servers and blah, 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 and it was hotter than, it was still always hot in there.
Oh,
it
yeah.
felt like sometimes. And then, I mean, but now, we don't even have a server. I mean, like, nothing, nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's definitely something we can look at, and like I said, we've been slowly moving to more cloud-based services, which eventually could lead to a point more cloud-based, but we also have a lot of things like camera storage that is held on-prem and much easier to access when it is on-prem.
okay.
But if I have no objection to starting that analysis because, that is the future, so to say.
Yeah, I'd just be curious. I
yeah.
mean, so.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Chris? Okay,
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Christopher. I do not have a budget memo for them, so there's nothing in the packet, but the next in the worksheet is the clerk treasurer's office, so I wanted to give them an opportunity if they have any budget updates or anything you want to talk about.
This is Ms. I'm short. Okay. This is Ms. Farrell, clerk treasurer. And Carrie Gagnon. Okay, we can talk about here, since the Cindy Gossett is not available right now. So only thing difference here, salary line, we have another person, more level. So also we have a decrease is a health line, dental line. We have 2 employees now using a city insurance, so there will be decrease on it. And there was also, and this your sheet is like a lines that dispose the account. Look at the legal notice and the legal consulting. There was like a backward. Oh, just the names? Yes, so I just addressed that. So also legal line, we increased a little bit because due to Cindy's in
Needing her own attorney for the CT office.
And consulting line, we have increased a little bit because we have our own software purchase next year. It's called the debt book. It's helping us all to control the debts.
This is something we're pretty excited about. The council, the administration, CPA firms that we work with, when we're asked, like, what exactly is the city's debt today? This is, all of our debt will be going into this system. And then you can see day to day what exactly our debt is, after, what payments are due and interest and how far they go out, that kind of thing. So we'll be able to tell, right now what our debt is.
So you will be seeing exactly amount calculation of how our city debts, the total of debts and the amount of debts. You will be seeing one piece of paper. And that's the one is went up. And let's see, anything else in here? Oh, postage we adding in because we issuing a lot of checks. So we've been using IT's postage payment, but we need actually, our department need more postage because we are the one mostly issuing checks, and we are always having an issue, it's a shortage on postage. So we keep asking IT to increase because middle of we are payment to go out, we short on the shortage. So we are own department having a postage budget. Also, we have increase on Which one is the increase? Consulting went up, right? A little bit because there was we are consulting, as you noticed, we're using a consulting CPA firm and investment. We are trying to find the right investment. You notice the interest went up because we are guided by the consulting company how to invest our money properly, make more money. So which is costing us some money. Then I think that's about it. We increase us.
We had somewhere for computers, for some new laptops. That's it.
I've got a couple comments.
Any question?
I do. This is what I would like to see. If Marla's going to be working with it, the consulting needs to be going back to where 2019 levels, and legal needs to be cut all the way back down to $10,000. The lawsuits are over. They should be. We need to cut that stuff. I mean, it's just my opinion.
So, as for the legal line, Cindy has to retain Will, the same way you have to retain a lawyer. And that, my understanding is that is the cost of Will's retainer, Mr. Webster's retainer.
That's too much.
That might be able to be negotiated, and I apologize, Cindy is at a funeral today, if you didn't catch that. I will talk to her absolutely about that. Can you talk about whether the consulting budget can go down or not?
Okay. We are using a consulting pretty much. Well, we can looking into again. We can discuss with the consulting budget.
I think, Troy, the hope would be with this new software that once we can see what we can see, we've never been able to see our debt on time.
Yeah.
And so I think the hope is that now that we can, we probably don't have to consult as often as we do.
Yeah.
Really,
But we've not been able to see it, right?
we usually consulting basically those who also we are consulting on more investment and the use of investment and
Well,
in
this,
early year end and those are priority. With the consulting
Crohn's office does a debt schedule for us
Yeah.
that they try to keep updated and do like quarterly reports and stuff. This debt book software will take care of a lot of that. So
Yeah, we
stuff
should be
won't
able to do some of
using
that
them for.
internally. I mean, I understand that. We should be able to do some of that internally.
Yeah.
We should not have to go out to Buzz's office to do that. I mean, I'm just saying that there's no way that we should be spending that much money. I mean, and I'm being discerning across all paths. So that's just my 2 cents worth. So.
Yes, so we are working on that part of it.
Any other questions?
Well, just Marla's the ad, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Marla's the ad, so everyone's kind of explained what the additional appropriation, or, I'm sorry, the additional position does or would do, and that's kind of what I was hoping, was that maybe some of, as we got an explanation of, well, we need this ad because the person's doing this, that yes, we would no longer need some of the consulting. So here's your opportunity to explain, I guess, Marla's ad.
Sure. So I am listed as project research. So I'm acting sort of as a liaison between the clerk treasurer's office and the council at this point. So for instance, when you have a question, I'm looking it up and trying to get the answers. If you want to report, do you want to know salaries across the board, whether they've increased or decreased? Any real estate transactions, capital asset sheets. I'm looking at all of that and frankly have written, it's being reviewed, a rather large capital asset policy. So my goal is to implement the things that have not happened or need to be done differently. I attended a webinar with the SBOA just the other day, and we're going to have to draft a letter to all nonprofits that the council grants money to by the end of the year, all those nonprofits will now have to file a special form with SBOA. So it's kind of staying on top of the rules, the guidance, drafting policy where it hasn't been made thus far, or updating. It just takes a lot of time to put it all together, and hopefully you'll really start seeing the fruits of my labor, which has been a lot. So rather than being part-time, which I'll stay part-time this year, it would be a full-time position. As Misha mentioned, I would not be taking benefits. I have those luckily through my husband's employer. We got a computer from informatics. But the other ladies have never received their laptops back from when they were confiscated. So it's very difficult in an emergency situation that Misha in particular, a regular laptop cannot handle running nav. So she actually probably does need a laptop. Carrie, absolutely, with P-card, nothing can be done outside of office hours, so no one should ever call, because we can't look at any of it if they don't have those laptops. But I personally don't need one. So hopefully, maybe have a better explanation of what I'm doing and what some of the expenses are. But yeah, overall, we're hedging towards cutting back on consulting because we now have manpower to do some of the reports and things that have been requested. And hopefully they won't need to do that. We won't have to pay to do that because we'll be able to run them together.
We can discuss with Cindy, and we can come out of some possible way to reduce their consulting how. I mean, I understand Marla's question, but she just started. We cannot dump in everything, whatever we have tried to cut, but it's we tried our best to accommodate what you request. So we can looking into what we're spending and what we can cut, whatever, had to do, somewhere reduce.
In all honesty, because I know I've talked to Marla about many things, and most of it has gone back to the things that were in the examination reports, and trying to, increase any efficiencies that we can finding out where we're not being efficient, those kind of things. So it seems like a lot of the work that Marla's doing is tying back to what has been recommended in the examination, just for my view.
Okay.
I got a couple of questions if I could real quick. So I'm sorry, did you say the laptops have not been returned yet?
Right.
Is there a reason why? I thought investigations, everything was over. Why are we buying new laptops, guys, if we got laptops sitting in an investigation that's supposed to be over? Can somebody explain that to me?
The investigation is over. Well, I'm sorry, the litigation is over. The investigation by the sheriff's department is still ongoing, and they have custody of the laptops.
Okay.
And they have not come to the end of their case, I guess.
Fair
So we
enough.
have no control over the sheriff's department.
Well, our office is 7 employees now with Marla. We need 5 more laptops because me and Kim has a laptop with a connector. But we actually desperately need, 5 more, but it's 5 more laptops, which is a laptop not really, it's not really working. We don't have just Kim and I has a laptop at this point. And well, I'd like to have additional, I just put it in the minds too, because it's need to be updated. So it's a kind of additional, the 6 laptops that we was asking for. Budget, we just like to budget included this consulting.
Hey, Jeremy, can we follow up with the police department, just ask them, sheriff's office, do they anticipate that returning those back this year, or is this really a necessary spend that we just can't avoid? They need laptops, I 100% agree, but I'd like to make sure before we spend it that we're not gonna get those back anytime soon. Chris, do you have information on that, or?
Chris, do you have anything? So 2 things. Yes, we'll follow up again. We have a number of times. It's all completely out of our control what the sheriff's department wants to do.
Totally get it, yeah.
The only other thing I would suggest is if we are buying laptops to replace the ones that are in custody, that we do it through the IT department, so that way we get what works with our system at the best price. Chris?
Yeah, so, again, I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I do believe the investigation is still open. The sheriff's department, does not have the laptops. There are 2 hard drives that our police department have in custody, that were given back to us by that. But because it's still open, it's, chain of custody. Nobody's touched them. They're just in that. Cindy did reach out to me about the laptop cost. That's where they got it, the budget from. So the plan was to order them through us. And, the only policy that we really stand by through this whole thing is we typically have 1 computer per employee. So we're happy to get laptops for them and roll new ones out. And we do obviously have a few we can give out, but it would replace their desktops. Because when you have 2 computers, we do run into login issues occasionally, and there's also licensing that has to go on each one of those computers. Laptop licensing is a little bit more than a desktop, but it does give you the mobility to, access city stuff wherever you are. So, yeah. So the reason 2 laptops are still unusable because we don't have the hard drives, and I can get the other 2 out. And then again, yeah, the price came from us, and the idea was to have them purchased through our normal channels of purchasing. So
I just wanted to apologize. I had it completely wrong, I suppose, so I went for the record. I really thought they were at the sheriff's department. Don't ask me why.
It's not important. I just
Sorry.
think we need to vet this out before we just start purchasing one. Sounds like you guys are on it. and
Right.
Please do due diligence before we just go buy more laptops. That's
absolutely.
all I'm asking, so.
I don't think we'd even consider buying them without, none of us are IT people. We wouldn't know exactly what we would need, but we felt like we needed to budget it. So your understanding was it came from our department?
Yeah.
Well, we need to,
Yeah, that
we
was
kind of need to move along here too, because we've got
Sure, thank you.
several other
You guys
departments.
good?
so-
So, Clerk Treasurer, I assume you're good? Done? All right, moving on. Next is the mayor's budget. The only thing that's been calculated into the mayor's budget is the cost of living increase and the associated benefit increases. We are all well aware that that is subject to ordinance, but we're proposing it in the budget to account for what we would suggest. Next is city council budget. Do you all need any time for your budget?
I'd like to know, I want to know what's in our budget. I mean, the cell pagers, legal services, I mean,
I
what's
believe
in
Counselor
our-
Johns inputted all of this. I did not have anything to do with it.
all right. I'll speak up from my opinion. I think the legal needs to be knocked back down to $10,000 or whatever. I hate paying attorneys anything, so, and we shouldn't be any different. And there's no need for us to lawyer up every time and do things, and I've stated my concerns about this numerous times. And I like Ann. She doesn't need to sit up here. She doesn't need to be at every meeting. I'm saying this to my fellow city councilors. I think it's a waste of our money, and it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. So, see, I can shock the water my own feet are standing in at times, okay? I don't know what that cell pagers is, 300, huh? Yeah, but city council, $339,000.
$339,000.
There's got to be a misprint there.
That's
Yeah.
gotta be wrong, right?
I mean, I've got the iPhone like 1, so I guarantee you it's.
Yeah, we get the lowest of the low, so I don't, and that's all we get. We don't get computers, we don't get anything else, so I don't know.
That is the standard phone for pretty much everybody, just so you know. I'm not sure, it looks like the line shifted down, so I'll find out where that cost is really from.
Okay, and same with services too. I don't know what that 96,000 is.
I have no idea.
Okay. Anywho,
Well, if you'd like, I can look into this and I'll
Okay.
correspond with
We
you
need-
all with at least what the details in OpenGov are, and once it's unlocked and ready for edits, we can make whatever edits you all want for your budget. And kind of to your first point, Troy, you're exactly right. The city attorney represents all of us. I understand not everybody might enjoy that, but from a liability perspective, they're responsible to
right.
represent everybody under that one retainer.
And just to piggyback on what Councilor Patton said, and I agree 100%. It's one thing if the council disagrees with the mayor, or the clerk disagrees with the council or the mayor, and they want to seek legal opinion, then I'm all for that. But my goodness gracious, we got 3 attorneys here for every meeting. Our meetings are long. I don't know if you've ever been through them. That's a lot of money we're paying just so everybody's lawyered up, protecting themselves. I think that's got to stop. Absolutely got to stop. And if we have to do it by controlling the budget, not giving the money, then so be it.
Okay,
Okay, next was Board of Public Works. There's essentially no change there. And then, so that would bring up John Nail. Did I skip fire?
let's get fire in.
Here, I think, yes.
I completely skipped that.
Thought fire was
So,
next, yeah.
We will go to the, what in the world?
Yeah,
Fire's
fire,
a couple pages later on the
Okay,
document you
so
gave
we'll
us.
just,
well, but it's not.
and so we don't skip around on the worksheet, we'll work through this. You may have to flip through a couple budget
Gotcha.
memos to get to the right folks, but, so fire would be up next. I believe Chief Roberts is gonna represent the fire department today.
Morning.
Chief Fire Department, on behalf of Chief Gaylor, he is enjoying a well-deserved vacation this week, so here I am. I'm not sure if that was strategically planned or not. But just to go over the highlights of our budget, some of the, one of the big ticket items that Greg alluded to was the 12 additional firefighters for the department next year. Of those personnel, we'll add a third transporting paramedic ambulance. Staffing that, we will have the ambulance in place, but we will be able to staff that with those funds. Also adding a shift training officer or an incident safety officer, which will be a double duty on that. That person is assigned each shift. They will assist in the training division with day-to-day trainings, new recruit trainings, anything along those lines. And also on the larger incidents, whether it's a crash on the highway, fire, alarms, or whatever, we would send that person as the incident safety officer, which our personnel allows them to be safer on the fire ground, whatever incident that might be. The cost of this 12 personnel is just over $1.4 million, and that includes salaries, benefits, their gear, the physicals to get them started, uniforms, recruit school, and so on and so forth. So that's the largest item we're asking for. One of the other large notable expenses is the vehicle lease. As approved in the past, we're adding a new tiller ladder to the department, a new fire engine, and a new ambulance. That had to be included in our budget for next year for the lease payment. So that's $490,000 for 5 years. So that's going to be included for the next 5 years to pay for those 3 pieces of apparatus within our budget. The fuel gas line, just like anyone else you've already talked about, that's an increase, pretty substantial based on the numbers that we're projecting out of the first half of this year, where we're going to be short already and where we need to be. Training line, our travel and training line is an increase just based on the number of personnel coming we have now and outside trainings we're looking to. And the final large increase is tornado siren. As the city's grown and houses are going out, we've got some areas that are uncovered by the outside warning systems in place that there's a circle basically around those sirens, what they should be able to hear. Kind of a little misnomer with those is a lot of people say, well, I can't hear those in my house. They're not intended to be heard in the house. They are intended to be heard outside. They're an outside warning system. They have weather radios, or now there's rave alert, anything along those lines that the county has that goes through a smartphone that can be heard in the house. So this is an outside warning system. So we'd be adding one siren to the city, and we would look to do that same increase for the next few years to get those gaps filled in around the city where they're not heard. The other one we just found out about just within the last few weeks is the firefighters' pension through the state. Had an increase. It was 17.5% that the city has to pay for the firefighters' pension. The state Board of Trustees for the pension office has deemed that that would go to 18% paid by the employer. So that's a $33,000, just over $33,000 increase that we will have to adjust our budget for in that line. I guess that being said, I'll see what questions you might have and go from there.
I was going to ask, you said 12 additional staff or firefighters.
Right.
Basically. Would they all be put on the staff at once, or would this be kind of a fill-in as we need? And
they would all be put on staff at one time. They would go through recruit class. We would need those in place. If we're able to hire these personnel, they would be hired first of the year, and they would have to go through the 20-week recruit school to become new firefighters.
So
and it'd be after that point where we could put that third ambulance in service.
They're not going to be available for several months.
Right.
Active duty then. Okay. That's a pretty big slug, I know, but.
It sure is.
Yeah.
And I know that Chief Gaylor's presented
He
the
has.
future of the departments and needs or whatever, and this is just the first step in the 5-year plan that's been presented in the past. And this goes right along with the plan that the vision of the department and the 5-year plan.
Can we get for fire, police, and everything, can we get a 5-year budget outlook? I mean, as the city's growing, and, if you look and say, hey, we need 3 to be comparable to other cities or whatever, we need 3 new fire stations or whatever, we need a new police station. Can we do a 5-year outlook of a budget for these folks?
Yes, we have 4 that exist right now, 4-year look. Greg has that as part of the sustainability plan. I would assume
Can we
can look out
delineate that and
another
just
year.
send that out to everybody? I think that would be good for everybody to understand as we look and we say, hey, as we're gonna expand in a city, here's what our costs are.
And I've asked for that. I mean, Chief Gaylord's got it. He sat down and went through it with me, and it's very detailed. And I've asked for the fire department to come back to the council and give us that look so we can start to think about what the impact is gonna have on the budget. I'm not sure why we haven't done that, but I'd make that request again. We need to get that out into the public because there are some significant costs coming that we need to wrap our arms around as a community.
Sure, we have the plan, which is what Chief Gaylor has talked about a number of times, and then we'll subsidize that with the financial strategy or the financial forecast for the strategic plan as well, so that way
That'd be
we
good.
can. Now, granted, there's unforeseen things in there, but it's as accurate as we can get it. So Greg will disseminate that amongst the group.
Been working on that within the fire department for quite some time, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears have gone into putting that together.
It's a good plan. I mean, it's very thorough, and he does side-by-side comparisons to other cities. I mean, it's real thorough.
And it's quite a bit. When you look at it, it's a pretty big shocker over the next few years of what our needs are. But based on where we're currently at and the projected increase in emergency calls for service that we have, this year, or last year, we were at 4,500 for emergency calls for service, and this year we're looking at approximately 5,000. That's a very substantial increase. And as things grow and continue, and what we're seeing, that is not going to go down. It's been a steady, pretty large increase over the last few years, with the exception of COVID year 2020, where no one wanted to go to the hospital or no one wanted to call us for anything for a period of time there. So that's the little strange part of that outlook. But years prior and years moving forward or whatever, we're going to see those substantial increases. And with that, we will need to increase our abilities and you know, time travel, you know, where our stations are at, what stations we're looking at, new fire stations we're looking at in the future, where we need to be. And with those come staffing to add that and equipment to put inside that fire station. So there are substantial asks in the next 5 years.
Absolutely. I got one more question. Jeremy, real quick, legal consulting, 15,000, what's that all about?
So the plan for 2023 is to take that, right now, all legal fees are housed in admin. We are planning to break that apart and put it in the associated departments. Fire has a little bit of stuff that goes on based on what they've spent, what's been assigned to them so far. That's the budget they would need to pay their portion. The heavy pieces go to admin, obviously carries some of it, but RDC, Kevin's team carries quite a bit for Plan Commission and some of those other things. So we'll have a breakdown about that coming up because there'll be an additional appropriation for this year to discuss that. So there'll be more coming, but you'll see a legal line in, I think there's about 5 departments: Public Works, Fire, Police, Community Development, Admin, and RDC will all carry a legal budget for next year.
Where's that line at?
The legal line?
I don't see it on here.
Huh?
Yeah, so it may not be on this sheet yet. So this sheet is, we have some updates that are pending that will go in after we make some of those decisions like the RDC and things like that. This, that legal expense being one of them, because I don't believe there is a fund established for fire legal.
Okay.
I have one question. Have we gotten the answer back on the SAFER grant yet? Or is that coming next month, or?
We have not heard anything back yet. I know there have been a number of awards, but we have not heard anything official.
Okay, I thought it was supposed to be August or September, and I mean, that's a significant amount of money, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Doesn't that cover like 3 years' worth of staffing? Does anyone know?
It covers 3 years, but it only covers, it steps down. So the first year it covers them, and then the second year it's like 50%, the third year it's like 25%.
Right, but obviously that's significant if that comes our way, but we've been waiting to hear back, and we haven't. Hopefully that'll happen before we're finished with this. I would like to know that.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be welcomed for sure.
Yeah.
I've got one question, and it's kind of a follow-up to Councilor Edwards' question. So, of the 12 new firefighters, you've already addressed the fact that that's going to be essentially a January start, basically. So it will be for the full 12 months. This may be a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there a high confidence that you're going to find 12 individuals that, I mean, 12 that's a significant number.
Absolutely. When we hire these individuals, we send them through recruit class. So when we bring them in, there's no experience. We train them to our standards, firefighting, EMS. They go through EMT school, firefighter 1, 2. They're trained by our personnel, or neighboring departments go together sometimes, as they did this last time in a recruit class. We have currently a list established to hire recruit firefighters from. We hired the 4 that we just finally got on the street just recently from that list. And when we established that list, there were 81 people on that list interested in becoming a firefighter at Westfield.
Okay. So you do feel confident then, obviously, with that type of
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure some of those
access.
numbers have dwindled a little bit based on the time and maybe getting them out of the department, but I feel very confident that we've got a good number of qualified people.
One more crazy question, because I'm not familiar with the process. Out of 12, is it realistic to think that once you hire the 12 individuals and start the training, when training's completed, you will have 12 firefighters
I
brought
believe
on?
so. There's always that possibility of losing somebody through class, but I believe that based on what we've done in the past and track record or whatever.
Traditionally, they stick. Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next up is Public Works. Public Works changes are summarized in a single memo, but when we look at the budget spreadsheet, it'll be scattered out a little bit because of the different funding sources like MVH and LRS. So John will help you through that if we need to move from one fund to the other on the worksheet itself.
There are several budgets within Public Works. So the personnel asked for 2023 is one additional person. That person is a laborer for the Parks Department. Currently, our park system, although vast, only has 3 employees in parks. This fourth person, as a laborer, would help keep up the level of service that our residents have come to expect, doing a variety of tasks in our parks. The base salary is $35,360, and if you include all the benefits listed there in the memo, the net increase is $62,717, the personnel expense. Revenue changes for 2023, I have estimated that revenue is actually staying flat. This is a conservative estimate. But I will note that if Ordinance 22-36, the stormwater utility rate is, you okay there, boss? All right, good. If Ordinance 22-36 is approved, which it's potentially could be adopted as early as September 12th in our next council meeting, we project a 9% increase in stormwater revenues. Expenses in 2023 of note, we did increase within LRS, increase the sidewalks and paths appropriation. We are seeing, as you might expect, concrete costs increasing. And in general, a lot of these costs are related to fuel costs, gravel costs, asphalt costs, and concrete costs all increasing over the last year. And we are trying to account for those costs in 2023. Within MVH, vehicle gas supplies increased $125,000. Again, fuel costs increasing. And you'll note that the consulting line increased by $8,500. I'll touch on this initiative in a second. Although this is a non-Dlgf fund, the park impact fee costs, we did have $1 million for construction of Simon Moon Park Phase 1, $650,000 for Grand Junction Plaza, the synthetic ice rink that Kayla had touched on earlier, and $750,000 for Freedom Trail playground equipment replacement. Again, non-DLGF, but I just want to draw your attention to that. Road impact fees, again, another non-DLGF fund. As you may expect, and as you're all aware, we have a large payment for the State Road 32 construction contribution that we expect to pay in 2023. That's $8.6 million in that line item, as well as $1.65 million for Jersey Street construction and $600,000 for Mule Barn widening and reconstruction out west. Stormwater fund, another non-DLGF fund. We did increase the infrastructure repair by 23%. We're seeing higher contractor costs, specifically with sinkhole and subsurface drain repair items. Again, they're being hit by material cost increases and labor shortages, as you might expect. And then the streets department, the general fund within parks, or excuse me, within public works, we had an increase of 26% for higher cleaning costs at city services. Currently, our city services cleaner. We anticipate potentially making a change there. We've asked for some improvements in their quality. So we wanted to reflect that in the budget. $148,000 increase to infrastructure repair, and then an increase on the electricity line item related to Grand Junction Plaza, and then several roundabout lighting packages that have come online in the last couple of years. So again, notable increases. The State Road 32 construction contribution is the biggest one that you'll see. And then I want to touch on new initiatives. I mentioned the $8,500 increase in the software package. That is because we hired a company called StreetLogix. They did a complete road scan of all of our network earlier in 2022 and provided what are called PCI scores, or basically a condition assessment of our pavement. It helps us with our asset management program. It helps us utilize our resurfacing package in a data-driven manner that can be measurable. And this is a $8,500 annual licensing fee. Additionally, the thing that I'm excited about with Street Logics is this is public facing. So a resident that wants to know when their neighborhood street might get resurfaced can get on a portal and see when it's going to be planned for resurfacing and how its condition compares to other streets in the city. So that's something I'm excited about. We get a lot of calls from residents asking about resurfacing and also wondering why their street might not be getting resurfaced and their neighbors is, and they look at the age of the street, not necessarily the condition. So again, data-driven helps us explain that decision-making process. 2022 additional appropriations, again in the memo, I've already touched on this, but subgrade material costs, that's gravel, asphalt, and gasoline has been the main increases that you see, and those will be additional appropriations that we asked for, and we are reflecting those in 2023, assuming that those costs remain the same in 2023 to what we're seeing in 2022. So there's a lot there. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Primarily, the biggest increase is in materials and supplies.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily in staff.
That is correct.
Okay. Any questions for John?
Well, just like the other ones, it seems like we're adding these legal lines into departments. But are we adjusting the admin line that used to be covering it all?
So yes, and if all goes according to plan, the additional appropriation that so everything that you see there is outside of the retainer. The admin line is the retainer plus some, right, today, or historically over the last, I don't know, however many years, you're averaging, I don't know, between $600,000 and $800,000 a year in legal fees, all been hitting the admin line. Well, that's not a very good accounting of where those dollars are actually being spent. The idea is you break that apart, you put those dollars where they go in the appropriate budgets. Admin still carries the retainer plus some administrative legal services, and then, so the sum total is the same, it's just put in the departments of where it's supposed to be.
Will we see, and I realize that we can go through this and, pick and pull all that together. Will that all be documented for us somewhere in a nice
Absolutely, yeah.
layout?
So I'm gonna have to come to you for an additional appropriation for 2022. And my goal would be, obviously it'll all be outlined there, projected for the remainder of the year, and you can actually, we'll be able to see what 2023 breakdown is as well. And then I would hope to adjust the dollars that have been spent out of the admin line to those appropriate departments for 2022, which that is where the additional appropriation will go.
That'd be very beneficial for our purposes.
But that's what I'm kind of confused about, because with our legal, with our retainer, then what is covered? If everything is going under these separate departments, what exactly is this retainer for?
The retainer is general counsel. Certainly can have Manny describe the difference when the time is right there, but it doesn't cover us being sued by anyone. It doesn't cover development agreements. It doesn't cover bond requirements for bond issuance. There's development agreements. I don't know if I already said that, but there's a whole laundry list of things. It doesn't cover right-of-way acquisition or land acquisition associated with public works projects.
Yeah, that's a big one, as an example.
Yeah, and one conversation Manny and I have had that I guess you all can consider is, what if we just make the retainer larger? And then it covers everything. So we find a balance, we have a more,
Well, that's what I guess I'm just not understanding. I mean, just like, I know I've hit up Manny on a few things this week. Are we being charged extra for that, or is that included in what we're doing?
It depends on what the item is. Generally, if you're calling him and asking him a question, yes, it's covered under the retainer.
Yeah, I can chime in, Jeremy.
Manny, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, happy to. That's a fair question. No, Councilwoman, all of those types of activities, attending meetings, phone calls, everything that I consider, as Jeremy said, kind of general counsel, city attorney work, I put under the retainer, and that's why historically we've had a deficit in the retainer of between 25 and 40%. What's not covered is, as Jeremy said, land acquisition, litigation, any other litigation, employment related or otherwise that we may run into, or stuff that's under our SIR before insurance picks up. We obviously try to get everything out to insurance as quickly as possible to avoid that and to cover it, but we have SIR requirements and we need to oversee it and make sure it's all done properly and the city's protected. Any sort of kind of high-end negotiations that go beyond general day-to-day operations is not covered. And so, yeah, as Jeremy said, part of the solution, which I think he's done a great job presenting, is a lot of, kind of put the heavy users from a budget standpoint and put those fees where they should go. And then one of the options was to, and then Councilman Johnson and I had a discussion. I don't know if he had a chance to talk to everybody before he left. I know he was in a bit of a hurry for his trip, but part of the discussion was, hey, let's, everything's going to right size starting really now and into certainly next year, where we're going to have kind of normal operations. Now, hopefully, some of those normal operations include a lot of good things, but we can, and as Jeremy said, we can discuss one of the options for you, if you want to consider it, is to have a larger retainer that encompasses more things. The idea would be, let's encompass everything except bonds, litigation, and special projects, like identified special projects, like the Graham Park RDC issue. So that way, everything is still being done, from trademarks to real estate to you name it, but it's under more of a retainer umbrella. And that's not to say that the billing would be just all bulk. We would still bill every separate matter, so you'd be able to see that whenever, like Councilman Patton, Gilbert, and Willis and I went through that. That would still be the case. Everything would be billed under separate matters, but it would be under a larger retainer, if that's something you want to see for kind of ease of review.
Well, I mean, and that's one of my questions, and I know I brought this up with Mayor. I have a concern in our budget. We have not at all prepared for legal expenses to deal with this Grand Park agreement, and not knowing what that's even going to involve. And yet we went down this road, and I'm sure incurred costs already legally that weren't planned for. And now moving forward, we're going to be in a situation where we just don't know if that's going to be $50,000 or $5 million, because who knows, right? That makes me uncomfortable.
Jeremy can speak to that. He has addressed that in the budget.
Yeah, so in that additional appropriation conversation that we'll have, hopefully very soon, we'll talk about that. There will be dollars in the, when we input the legal fees, there'll be dollars in the RDC proposed budget that includes this kind of predetermination. So all the pre-bid work and the proposal process and review, all of that stuff will be accounted for, and then we'll have to make a determination. There's no way to know if it goes beyond that. If there's a recommendation to council on RDC and they say no, then there's no due diligence, there's no legal, there's no anything after that. So some of that stuff is still up in the air, and we'll have to address those things when that time.
Well, the hardest part is going down this road when, I know that RDC didn't know about it, council didn't know about it, but yet we're incurring costs throughout the whole process and potentially moving forward that none of us approved. That puts us in a difficult position, because now we're going to be forced to be paying these bills for something that none of us signed up for. Do you know what I mean? So there's a disconnect. And I don't want to see this get out of hand and wind up being something that we're paying millions of dollars for with no outcome. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Address part of that. I mean, RDC obviously did know, issued the RFP. That's all been talked about to death. And as far as Jeremy, like I said, does have a plan. He just said he does.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you repeat that first part again, please? I thought I heard you say something. I think I might have heard it wrong.
The issuance of the RFP.
Yes.
Was done by, what was done by the admin staff as the other RFP, and that was all done properly, and I don't want to rehash any of that. I think that's been asked and answered. But as far as the budget moving forward for what the review will entail and all of that, Jeremy is going to address it, and we are cognizant of that. that will be very clear. There will be a budgeted amount for the review process that will make it to the RDC line, and then a clear path beyond that if we get there.
Are there any non-legal public works questions?
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, John.
All right, thank you.
Who we got left, Jeremy?
We got Grand Park next. Matthew?
Good afternoon. We made it. I wanted to come up today and give you guys the overall kind of purview to which I'll be sharing with the RDC at the September meeting when I present the 2023 budget then. But a few highlights that I wanted to bring to your attention as I forge forward with the plan of moving forward as business as usual. I have 2 members that I'd like to add to the team at Grand Park, one of which would go into our grounds department, which would be a specialist for irrigation purposes. Yes, we're in year 8 this year of operation, but the irrigation system has been in the ground for 11, and we're starting to see some of those common wear and tear pieces. In years past, this was a service that we paid a third-party service to do. Over the last 8 months or so, we've been doing it all in-house with our grounds manager, primarily taking the brunt of that. As I assessed the situation, I felt like it was necessary to remove him from the day-to-day of maintaining the irrigation, so he had the purview of the full grounds department, and wanted to bring in a specialist for that purpose. So the base salary for that is about $52,000. And then the other position that I'd like to add is another operations assistant to assist our operations department with day-to-day management of all activity that's coming to the campus. That base salary is around $40,000. In totality, with the additions and benefits, it's about just under $180,000 of net add to the personnel. Because I know it was asked earlier, for Grand Park specifically, the 5% cost of living for 2023 will be around $34,500, bringing our overall salary budget line for Grand Park to just north of $1 million in totality. And just as a reference point for 2022, we're just under $900,000. So wanted to make sure I provided that information. A few other things just to mention from a revenue standpoint. We have a few decreases as we were looking at our revenue lines in totality, and we are seeing the ebbs and flows throughout the year. Wanted to make those budget lines more real, and so therefore we had a few drops in some revenue lines, but one increase in a revenue line is in our refund account. As many of you know, for Colts training camp, we pay for training camp out of the F&B budget. There are a lot of items that we pay for that are then reimbursed by multiple vendors. That comes into a refund line in the Grand Park budget and then is reallocated into the F&B line, but I need to receipt those in order to get them back. So therefore, that's what that increase is represented, given some of the increased costs that we're seeing with camp in totality. From an expense standpoint, a few notable areas, and this may be different than the sheet you guys had received. I've been doing some work with a few different vendors to try and come up with some areas of increase, but the major item that I know we've been talking about for quite some time is turf replacement, specifically on the field sports side of the campus. I'm allocating about $2 million additional to our construction budget to accomplish the replacement of 4 turf fields. So the approach that I'm taking at this point is to replace 4 fields this year, or I'm sorry, 4 fields in 2023, and then the final 3 outdoor fields in 2024, which would then give us fresh surfaces all outside. on those areas. So about a $2 million budget there for the 4 surfaces that we'd look to replace in 2023. Also, an area that will have an addition is to the consulting budget. This is, again, a topic that we've discussed a few times at some of the council meetings, but when the original consulting budget was approved last year, there were some additions to scope that were made after the budget approval process was made for 2022. Because of that, we will be over budget in the consulting line for 2022. I've right-sided that so that in 2023, we'll come in under budget. So that overall increase for 2023 will move to a $700,000 budget line item. Another notable piece that I noticed as we were going through this process is our water and sewer line, for whatever reason, was significantly under budgeted in years past. I've worked to increase that budget line to get it to a base budget of $30,000 to cover the expenses that we've seen. Finally, from an additional source, from a noteworthy standpoint, is our services lines in both the indoor and outdoor budgets, collectively taking those up in totality to just over $850,000. Many of those things, or many things that fall into that services lines, but most notably are custodial services that are done at the campus. And then in my additional notes and appropriations, I think, again, another thing that we've talked about in totality, there may be some lines within the specific budget that will be over budget, but at the end of the year, barring anything catastrophic, Grand Park will come out net positive from an operational standpoint. So I don't anticipate any issues there.
Okay, I have a question. How many employees are we carrying, and how many employees is the William Knox organization
Certainly.
carrying?
Yeah.
In relation to Grand Park?
Yeah, so at our peak, we had 23 individuals on campus this summer. Many of them are seasonal in nature as they help maintain the grounds facilities throughout the summer months and go back to school. William has 2 staff members dedicated to the campus, one of which does our business development from a sales perspective, the other of which does sponsorship. And then there's a few other members that he utilizes for other needs, but are not dedicated directly to Grand Park. But in totality, I believe he has 5 or 6 on staff in totality, and all of which have some part of Grand Park, but 2 dedicated to the facility.
What was it before we did the consulting agreement? Do you know?
Can you re-ask that question?
Yeah, how many people did we have? What's our comparable? I mean, is William now just all of a sudden operating, 50% more efficient than we were when we had everybody as employees?
So so going back a full year, William, I filled his role. One of the members from an administrative perspective left. We brought on another member this year to take on some of the accounts receivable and assisting with our client services perspective. He had 3 part-time members. Grand Park had 3 part-time members that he took with him, which he turned into 2 full-time members.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of the numbers, if I remember right in my head. I mean, so I don't remember the additional ask actually at the city council meeting for the adjustment to the contract with William. Do you?
We never really saw the details of the contract. We were under the impression that, okay, we're going to pay more essentially in consulting through legacy, but that our personnel costs at Grand Park would therefore go down.
Sure.
And we've never been given any financial numbers stating any of that I've seen.
So from a staff standpoint, I'll speak to the Grand Park staff. When William took the team that he had taken and the responsibilities that he had taken, we had additional staff members allocated for the budget for 2022, which I have utilized to improve services that we do on a day-to-day basis. Again, we added a few grounds members. We added that full-time member to assist with some administrative pieces that we do at the park from a day-to-day. So hopefully that helps clarify some of that confusion.
In my mind, this 2.4, 2.6 number sticks in my head, and if I'm looking at the consulting agreement and now what we're actually spending more by having the consulting and the employees. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying that that's not right. I mean, you know, it's the old, I don't mean this to you, Matt, but it's like the Washington politics. It's like, no, we're cutting the increase, right, type thing. And that's, I mean, is that number sticking? 2.4, 2.6 consulting agreement? I'm just, again, I may have my numbers wrong on that. And then, anyways, okay, that's just a question I have. I mean, I don't even know what my question is actually, maybe, but I feel like if we are spending more, then that's appropriate, fine. But the promotion side, I also want to see what we're getting on that piece of it, using Williams Group versus whether they were in-house employees. I just want to know, like, my net change and what we had versus what we
And I know
have.
in speaking with William, he plans to share a lot of what he's doing on his side of things at the next RDC meeting. But if you go back real quick to the 2.6, what does that reference?
So before, we had this, I remember seeing something, 2.4, 2.6 million, we were actually gonna save $500,000 by having it, or $600,000 by having the consulting group do their piece of it. But now if I'm looking at the numbers, we're actually over and above that. Again, I might be wrong.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but the concept of what you're saying is absolutely spot on correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to look into that for you. I'd love to dive into what those numbers, where they came from, and what we're doing with the resources that we have now available to us.
Yeah, no, I mean, no problem. I'm just trying to think it through in my mind that where we were.
Yeah, and I wasn't heavily involved back then either. I do recall, though, that I think when the LSG contract came on, there was other consultant contracts that went away or were replaced. So Matt and I will look at that. We'll get a breakdown of
Just maybe an accounting of like where we were, where we're at, how we're doing.
Personnel plus consulting.
Yeah.
And how many people are working for Grand Park?
Yeah.
Right.
How much does it cost when you add those two together?
Just so we make sure we're on the same
2022,
page.
2023.
William only took a piece of what he was
Right.
doing with him. So
But it was supposed to be a
everything-
net savings. And again,
Understood.
I'm not judging. I mean, maybe this is what we need. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not
And-
saying that's not the case.
I think what Matt's asking for is folks to help maintain and operate the park, which is not what Williams' team is doing currently, but we'll try to get you a breakdown
Okay.
on those things over
Yeah,
the next couple
it's
weeks.
always been my objective to utilize the resources that we have from a staffing standpoint to increase the scope of services that we are
Sure.
dedicated to doing on a day-to-day. So, yeah, happy to run these numbers down and figure that out.
Okay, can I just get one other question on the turf leases? So when Bullpen, when they put in the turf on the additional fields at their expense on some of those things, are we required to replace those things?
So the two,
On the ones
specifically
that-
the two turf infields that were replaced this year came out of the turf escrow.
Right.
That Bullpen, yes, does pay into, but we work collectively to designate those funds for that turf.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we're gonna be at a shortfall on our turf lease at some point though, because they went and turfed then field 7, 8, 9.
Years back, is that what you're
Yeah,
referencing?
yeah.
When the park converted all diamonds to turf?
Yeah, we had the drainage issues or whatever, and then we went to the turf, and it wasn't just 7, 8, 9. I think it was maybe 15, 16.
It was
around the.
It was all infields, with the exception of 8 fields from the onset.
Like the softball fields were done too,
Correct.
right?
So all infields now are turfed.
So
All
are we
but
gonna have a
8.
shortfall then on our turf lease ultimately? I mean, maybe not this year, but I mean, in future years, we're gonna have a shortfall if we have to cover those turf leases, or if we have to returf all those. I mean, I'm just saying.
From the escrow standpoint?
Yeah, because I'm just, sorry, I'm just talking out loud here. I mean, maybe those amounts should have been renegotiated on what they're paying in, because even though they paid those up front, then we're gonna have to returf those as they become worn. I know they're just replacing like batter's boxes and doing some things like that, cosmetically now, But, I don't know, I'm just thinking we're gonna have a shortfall in the turf lease.
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger conversation that we can sit down and have. The turf he's talking about right now are the sports fields on
Yeah.
the outdoor fields.
No,
But yeah, I think as an overall strategy, we should look at that.
Yeah, just kind of looking 5 years out, saying what,
Yeah.
where are we at?
Matt, in terms of, the repayment of the 6 million, now that'll be coming through the RDC, that leads me to believe that you ought to be in great shape going forward with all kinds of maintenance and turf
Yeah, so-
replacement. So I'm operating under that assumption.
Yeah, specifically the $2 million ad for the turf replacement needed to come from somewhere. That's coming out of that cash reserve that we have worked to accrue. So that's not, I mean, in full transparency, if this budget is approved for 2023, we will show a deficit budget because we are paying for, someone talking?
Thank you.
Manny, you're
Manny
on.
might be on.
Manny, your speaker's on.
Thanks, Troy.
The 2023 budget will show a deficit because we're utilizing those cash funds to perform that capital replacement. Yeah, good question.
Any other questions? Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Who's up next, Jeremy?
All right, guest services. Michelle?
Wait, before we move on, this is something that's just been bothering me for so long. So the electricity bills, all the other utility bills out of Grand Park are so big. I see them in our claims, and it gives me heartburn that we're paying so much. And I'm like, is there a reason we're not putting out like a few windmills out there and making that investment to generate our own electricity? I'm literally being serious. I'm not trying to be funny. Have we looked into any of these alternative energy sources? I mean, not only from an environmental standpoint, but for everything else. I mean, our rates are gonna just keep going up, so kind of what are we waiting for, and are we just?
Yeah, to my knowledge, we have not, but I haven't been involved. Matt may know more. I think solar panels would probably be more acceptable from a zoning and neighborhood standpoint than windmills, but it's something we can certainly investigate.
Yeah, I'll just speak based on previous experience. There was about a 3-year run where we had name your solar panel company come in and pitch the product. At that point, the upfront capital expense was significant to the point where we did not further pursue that project. But if that's something we would like to investigate, I'm happy to reach back out to those groups to restart that process.
Looking at the increases that we're seeing and what we're likely going to see, talking to Duke Energy and other people, and I'm talking sizable increases, I think that the economics of it might be changing. And I know, like, just to put panels, we can't really do that on the indoor center due to the weight. But I don't know if technology exists for something else. I don't think anyone's investigated these options. And it is gonna be an upfront cost, but at this point, is that likely going to make more sense, knowing what we're going to face coming in the next several years?
We can certainly work to evaluate those options.
Yeah, and Matt can further define it, but I think our goal now is, considering all these things are leased assets, is to ensure that our lease rates cover those increases, and I know Matt's working on that. So field lease, they're now going to charge for lights, they're going to charge for several other things that we haven't charged for in the past, but really making sure that the rental revenue offsets the additional cost is the business aspect of what we need to focus on.
I mean, and I can see that, to a point, things like if we weren't needing to divert what we are for food and beverage tax, to be able to put something like that into the investment and the energy cost over there would, inevitably save us money down the road. Just something like that makes sense to me, so.
I like where you're going with that, just from the standpoint of what our hotel revenues are to what our utility costs are. I don't know. I'm gonna think about that some more.
Hey,
For another day.
Can you give me a call? I'll have some insight on the microgrid suggestion there and give you some leads.
Perfect, thanks, man.
Sure.
And to the food and beverage point, our food and beverage revenue has certainly outpaced what we are currently spending or budgeting, so it could be a good revenue source for that.
Okay, thanks. Matt? Next up, guest services, I guess.
Rochelle.
Hi, good afternoon. Rochelle Freed, Director of Guest Services. My budget presentation is kind of two-part. The guest services portion of it is actually seeing a decrease this year by 5%. That's due to some staffing changes since last year's budget was submitted. So overall, everything is decreasing across those lines. The only increase that we had was workers' comp, so I think we're in pretty good shape, no notable changes. We do also manage the trash portion of the bill. So for our revenues, we are looking at a net add of $496,600. This mainly stems from the projected average of household increases for residential homes in the city. Currently, as of just yesterday, we are billing 17,126 residential properties. We are expecting that to go up to an average of 18,000 homes by next year. That increased with the rate of $12.67 per month will take our quarterly fees that are passed through to raise trash service up to $2,736,720. In addition to that, we do charge $1 per month for an admin fee, $3 quarterly. So that will also increase that revenue that we keep here to $216,000 next year. Some other outliers are credit card convenience fees. We charge $2 per transaction when residents, or I should say customers in general, choose to make their quarterly payments online. We have seen a large increase in people utilizing that service. So we're looking to increase that from the budget of $20,000 to $40,000, given that we were already at $22,000 as of the end of Q2. Along those same lines, the penalties for late payments, we are also seeing an increase in that. So I have increased that from $40,000 to $60,000 for next year. Again, as of the end of Q2, our revenue there was $42,714, so already what was budgeted for the year. Expenses are also similar. Again, we do bill in advance of the quarter, so we issue refunds based on residents or, again, just customers in general that have moved out of the city. We are already over that budget for this year, so I'm looking to increase it by 80% to $19,400 for next year. The end of Q2, we were at $8,815. Again, that is just due to the nature of us billing in advance and then residents and business owners moving away from the city before that quarter has finished. Our credit card processing fees for, again, those online services where they choose to make those payments online, I am looking to increase that slightly from $43,000 to $56,000. At the end of June 30th, we were already at $26,000, so I think we will definitely be ahead of the $43,000 that was originally projected. And again, the trash res quarterly fee, the same as it was in revenue, we're upping that count to 18,000 average households that we will bill next year. And that is it for my notable changes. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a question. If you use a debit card, is there a transaction fee on that?
It is the same. It's just for the Visa or MasterCard, regardless of it being a credit card or debit.
But a debit card, no.
It is still the same $2 fee for a debit card if it
Okay.
has that Visa or MasterCard logo.
Okay. But what is the credit card or the debit card cost? Does that depend on who the service is, whether it's a?
It does vary slightly. For that reason, we don't take Discover or American Express since their charges are significantly higher than Visa or MasterCard, but they're quite similar.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Rochelle.
Thank you, Rochelle. Next up, we're getting toward the thin part of this packet. That's good. Communications, Chris Profit.
Jeremy, thank you. Council members, Chris Profit, Director of Communications. On my budget memo, we just got finished with a group of great interns that we had over the summer, college interns. One of the things that I wanted to do moving forward, because I believe in internships, I'm a product of an internship, is to pay interns. They put a lot of work into what we do during the summer, and so I'm proposing a $4,800 add to my budget under that line to pay these interns, 2 internships, $15 per hour for 10 weeks, and that would be for next summer. Some other changes, and of course that doesn't incur any other costs other than the $15 per hour. Some other changes that we have, one is adding $500. We're really just replacing a project management service that we have with another motion array, which is pretty much a robust animation service that our graphic designer uses. We are a department of 3 people, so it's me, then there's also our graphic designer, and then we also have Sarah, and many of you know who Sarah is. Sarah is really more of a communications manager and also does a lot of our digital work. So we're asking for that. It's just it really replaces one service with another, and it's a subscription. The other is a social media boost. I'm a big proponent of social media because I know we have to reach people and we have to go to where they are. And so I'm asking a lot more from our people all the time. I ask a lot more of myself all of the time. And so for us, it is a very minor thing that I want to do, but we're increasing our social media boosts. A boost is through Facebook. And so we pay Facebook in order to reach maybe 500 extra people that aren't part of our group, our social media followers. And so it's to reach more and more people. We're selective in how we do it. So far, we haven't done it this year because I want to get a better grasp as we continue moving forward with our social media plans, a better idea of who our audience is. So we're constantly doing an analysis and of our growth and how we're reaching people and how we are communicating with them. And so that's one of the ways that we do it. So I'm asking to increase that by $900. I do want to make a mention under services, we have a media reporting service that's called Cision. Cision is, I'm flip-flopping. We decided to take that out of the consulting category because it really doesn't accurately reflect what that is. It's a media reporting service. I even brought some examples of what it looks like if you care to see them later, but it gives us an idea of who is picking us up, where we are being seen. We had an unfortunate incident with the police department involved in making an arrest for 2 of our employees who were part of an unfortunate incident that happened on Monday that you're all aware of. So that lets me see who has reported on that and what they reported. So it's an amalgamation of where we are, who's covering us, how they're covering us. We can't always see what everybody's saying about us. This allows me to see what everybody's saying about us. And that includes Grand Park, it includes the council, it includes just about every department that we have if they're mentioned in a news media report. So what I ended up doing, I moved it to services because it's not a consulting. It's not a consulting service that we use, it's a service. And so you'll see that category changed. It went to under services from consulting. I made a mistake and took out $15,000 under consulting. We put it back in there. That is actually for our communications consultant under economic development. That's Michelle Kirschmary. Michelle's worked for the city for quite some time. She's a conduit to our business community, and so I had to reinsert that back because that's how we pay her. She is a mother of 3. She works 2 days a week with us. Her work time can vary, so we have to make sure we're able to pay her throughout the year. That's why I put that back in there. So that was my mistake. Also, one other thing that I'm asking for is $25,000, excuse me, for a part-time employee. The position is a community engagement coordinator. the scope of work really is responsible, that person would be responsible for developing and managing marketing, websites, social media, community events, and related work for the city. Develop, identify partnership opportunities, coordinate information with outside agencies. That includes nonprofits, schools, local businesses, public safety agencies, public service groups. Collaborate with communications to determine our marketing needs. And then also a couple of other big items here is that they would monitor trends in social media and website tools, applications, the channels, design, strategy, and how we execute our website strategies, our social media strategies. It is really a position. I'll just let you know that, again, I'm huge on social media. That's how we reach people. We have to be, for me, my belief is I'm asking more and more all the time for content for us, and it's working. We did a social media analysis about 3 weeks ago. Right now, we're adding generally about 160 social media followers, and this was just for Facebook, per month. We are leading all other cities at this point in the amount of people that we're adding to our Facebook account, and that's primarily the biggest one that we have, and that's how we primarily send our messages out, and those messages can vary. Councilwoman Spoljarek, of course, you're a consumer of our material, and thank you for that, because I see you sharing it a lot, and we appreciate that. But really what we're doing is we're leading in content among all the other Hamilton County cities in what we're doing, and our projection is that we will be right behind Fishers in terms of the number of Facebook followers we have within the next 3 years. That's quite an accomplishment because we were very far behind. So that's why I'm asking for that ad. And at this point, I'll take any questions that you have.
Question?
Yeah, Chris, did you help with this then? The postcard?
May I look at it?
Yeah, the postcard that went out to everybody?
No.
Okay, why not?
I was not part of that.
Why not? Were you asked to be part of an awareness campaign of what the city council has done?
No.
I thought Mike Johns asked you in one of the meetings, actually.
In a public meeting.
In a public meeting.
He asked for me to meet with him about communication issues. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think it was asked several times for you to help us put something out.
I was not asked directly by anybody to do that.
You were. It was actually in a public meeting. That's okay. And I'm gonna say this in the nicest way I can, and I'm not nice, but I think the communications department is crud. I mean, it ought to be part of Westfield Welcome. You don't help us. All you do, it's a political mouthpiece for the mayor most of the time. We asked you to help us. It was in a public meeting. I'm telling you, we asked. Nothing.
The only request that I had, Councilman, was from Mike Johns to meet with him personally to discuss communication issues, and I did, and that was never raised.
Okay.
I would have known that. I would have remembered it.
That's okay. I would say.
I'm sorry you think we're crud.
I do. I would say that this budget should be no higher than last year, and in fact, I would probably cut it and make Westfield Welcome in charge of communications. And
so the only thing I'll add to that is Westfield Welcome, and not disparaging them, they're event focused. Communication department helps us with, say for instance, our employees get attacked on the side of the road. We need people to help us make sure we're not either incriminating ourselves, but also make us sound professional and all of those things. I think if you looked at the work that they do,
I see it.
Very, very
Mondays
little
with
of
the
it
mayor.
I think you're looking at it very myopically.
Yeah.
If you think that Mondays with the mayor is all we do, Councilman, you're wrong.
Okay. I would not increase this budget 1 cent over last year at all. That's my recommendation. I mean, and in fact, like I said, if it was me, I'd put Westfield Welcome in charge of it. I said this before you came here too, Chris, so nothing probably necessarily against you. It's just, I said this before, we have, yeah, I said it. I think, I think this is wasted money, and it can easily be part of Westfield Welcome. They can be in charge of somebody in charge of communications. That group can help Westfield Welcome anyways, and go from
So
there.
I would like to offer an opportunity for the three of us, and we can bring Kayla in the conversation as well, for us to sit down and talk about the differences on what everybody does and the value that communications department and having a communications department does for the city. And I'm not talking about
Yeah.
me, and I'm not talking about the mayor. I'm talking about the city of Westfield.
Yeah.
We are constantly inundated with people wanting to interview us, wanting to a response on stories, all those types of things. I don't have time to write a response to everything all of the time. That's what Chris does. And he crafts it in a way that I can't.
That could be a function of Westfield Welcome. We could
I
save the
disagree with
taxpayers
you on
fif-
that.
we
I
could-
just disagree. I don't think you have a grasp of what we do.
Okay, we could just save the taxpayers $15,000 by even doing a mailing with all this Facebook information that we're doing out there that's advocating for the city, talking about what the city council did or didn't do or whatever, but we don't. So,
I was never even approached about the
No one
the
in our
postcard. If it would've come
department
to me,
was.
we-
it must
we
be a
absolutely-
figment of my imagination.
It must be.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's move.
Can I just quickly offer something? And only because I'm on all the social media, and I have been for too long. It drives me nuts. But it is a handy tool. It doesn't reach everybody, though. And the problem I have, I think, is that a lot of the content is not what the actual people want. Now, I realize that communications is serving internally. It's serving external outside of the city. It's serving a lot of these other venues. And I think where there might be a disconnect is what information that people want who live here and how they get it. You know, I hear a lot of times, I didn't hear about that, and it's already done, or I'm getting noticed today, and I didn't know a darn thing, or what's going over there, no one tells us, you know, and again.
We've done
might
an
as well-
analysis of that. We're engaging 4 times over what we did prior to me being here. Our engagement with our audience is 4 times higher.
I believe that, I mean, on Facebook,
Yes, yes.
but I can tell you, I know plenty of people who also they're not on Facebook. And also, it's not coming across their feed, and for whatever reason.
Well, if they're not on Facebook, they wouldn't see it.
But that's the thing, I mean, people don't always consume information from Facebook. My husband being one of them, he's never even seen it before.
So are there
Doesn't ever
other-
want
We're on
to see it.
YouTube as well.
Yeah, are there other platforms or
We're
other
on Twitter.
methods?
And I get it,
Instagram.
and I'm saying it, and I know the challenges in trying to reach people and educate them, because you're never gonna reach 100% of the people with 100% of the information. I've understood that
No doubt
forever.
about it.
But again, what I'm trying to say is, the complaints that I get from the community are that, again, they're not getting the information they're actually looking for. You know, some of the stuff like the Mondays with the mayor, it's nice and it's a little bit of education, but it doesn't help them understand why that road is being closed and why they think NDOT didn't coordinate with us, or, you know what I mean?
That's why
Stuff
we
like
include
that.
John Nail in our videos as well.
Well,
So-
and again, they're project-specific, but I'm saying it's like, there's a lot that happens that goes on, say, for instance, at the APC, the council, the Economic Development Commission, whatever it is, that people are like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And that's the information they're not getting.
And happy to work with you and take suggestions. We're doing what
Absolutely.
seems to be the most impactful that we know. We know mailers don't work. We've tried it with bills since I've walked in the door 17 years ago. They don't work. I can't force people to engage. Every meeting is online, posted, so if they want to know what's going on, they can go. The information's out there.
There's lots of ways we
But
can.
it's just an interesting study,
channels.
right? So the State Road 32 corridor, and I only say this because this is kind of comical, because over the years, there's been probably thousands of posts of people saying, what is going up next to Meyer? What is going on up next to Chick-fil-A? I mean, whatever it is. And so Victor from Planning Commission, he actually came up with his own graphic. And now that's circulating, I think, far more than anything you guys have done, just because that's the stuff that people care about. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's the kind of thing that maybe we should be trying to focus a little bit more on is the stuff
Okay.
that people are
I'm
actually
happy to
looking
take
for.
any advice.
Yeah.
I am.
But I realize you have internal communications and external communications, and it's not just the residents of the city, but we represent the citizens, and so we want to be able to provide
Sure.
them that information.
Absolutely.
The majority of what we do is to try to communicate with the people. And if there are certain topics that they want to hear, if you let us know about that, because we don't hear it, we respond and communicate what we think folks want. We have different platforms. Travel Westfield describes projects. We do everything that we know how to do, but we're certainly
But I
aren't
mean, our
perfect.
website isn't updated. I mean, it's comical that you can't even get some basic information on our website. So how are we really
For
affecting?
instance, we do have banners at the top that will give people information on press releases that we have, on events that we have. It's a red banner at the top of the website.
Oh, I know, but I mean, I've typed in just some basic search terms, come up with 0. And I'm thinking the average citizen, they're gonna think to go to our website looking for a piece of information, for instance. And it's like really difficult for me that I've been around for almost 20 years. And I have trouble finding a document, you know, and I can't even help but think how much trouble that is for a citizen.
Government websites can be clunky.
Well,
and
exactly,
so
but it's
the-
like if we're not, again, just like the capital improvement plan, what's going on with parks, whatever it is. I'm just saying, I think that there's opportunities that we can be doing
I
better
agree.
to get more information
Absolutely.
out to our citizens, that's who we're actually trying to serve here.
Perhaps we've learned this afternoon, that maybe the citizens would be better served if there were more communication between the council, who could explain a little bit of what we're hearing, and communicate with the communications department as to what the taxpayers would like to hear.
I'd be happy to be part of that.
Yeah. So maybe that's our takeaway from this, and you know, kind of heard your request, understand your request, but it sounds like we certainly need some more communication with the communications.
No, like that part-time communications manager, if one of their big roles and responsibilities was to work with us in helping to get certain messages out,
Which
and
we
with
can
the
do.
other departments and stuff, I mean,
Absolutely.
maybe that makes sense then, because I know that's what our residents are looking for, so.
Good.
Let's move on to human resources.
Thank you, Chris. Last and certainly not least, thankfully at last, human resources. This is Brady.
All right, just for the record, Brady Laux, Director of Human Resources. It's an honor to be up here today. I've met a few of you individually, and you guys are all great. Please always feel free if you guys have any questions regarding human resources or anything internally. I'm more than happy to communicate what I can. Just keep that in mind. I do want to give you just some history with the Human Resources Department. So for over a decade or close to, there have been 2 people, okay? 2 people. Currently today, we still have 2 people. If you look at the record, 7 years ago, we had 194 full-time employees. As of today, we have 251 full-time employees. That does not count seasonal, part-time, or interns. That does not count vacancies that we currently have in different departments, and that also does not count the new positions that could be approved for next year. So with that being said, we did have a restructuring of the department in order for us to grow into upcoming years. In November of '21, we did redirect the department, so there is a director, which is now me filling that position. Prior to that, there wasn't a director role. It was a manager and an assistant. In order to be consistent with other departments, we did feel like that was necessary. 1, to structure and be consistent with other departments, but 2, in order to grow and move forward and add other employees into the department, it was important to have a director role. So that did happen in November of '21. That was after budget season. I promise you that was not planned. It organically happened. So I will let you know there will be an appropriation for salary, things like that, that will come down the line. Jeremy is aware of that, and we'll get all of that to you guys at that time. As far as for the budget for '23, I am requesting a new position, an HR generalist position. For the Archer study, it is a grade level 8. So if you look at the memo that I believe all of you have, you can see the exact salary amount. That is the minimum for a grade level 8 at a 5% increase on the Archer scale. It also goes through the health dental line. That is budgeted for a family plan. Obviously, because we don't know what that third person would be on, they could be on an employee only, clear up to family. I'm willing to reduce that if you guys see that that is necessary. FICA Medicare is on there as well as PERF, workers' comp, and the 401A matching for that new hire. So the grand total for that new hire would be $107,735. Once again, that could be overly inflated due to that family contribution that we are estimating that may not happen. That new role really is going to have a focus on the new hire experience as well as employee engagement. That is something that HR has tried to juggle just with 2 people, along with benefits and compensation, performance management, training and development. I mean, we wear a number of hats. Honestly, I don't know how it's only been 2 people for so long, but here we are. So I am requesting for a third person, and I feel like if even one more employee is added, we're at wit's end. So with that in mind, if there's any questions about that, I will answer at the end. To go through my operations budget, there are a few things that I am requesting that are new to the HR budget line. One of those is the all-occasion cards and sympathy cards. We have a $2,000 budget for that. That has never been budgeted in the HR line. It typically has always came out of admin. I do not know if that was ever itemized in admin's budget, but for HR, we are the ones that purchase any sort of funeral gift, sympathy gift, as well as sending out cards for anybody that's had a loss, a birth of a child, things like that. If somebody has an illness, for example, the incident that happened on Monday, HR sends out a card. So that's something that we have always managed, but not always managed, my apologies. We actually started managing sympathy gifts this past year in 21. So that is something that I feel like we need to definitely allocate for so we can have a direct correlation of the cost since we are the ones that are purchasing those items. So that is $2,000. We usually spend about $80, give or take, depending on what the gift is. The other line item that we are adding or requesting to add is for the new employee welcome gift, $2,000. I will let you know, once again, this has never been budgeted before. In past years, it was like, oh, we need this, so people just spend it if we had it in our line. I want to be more intentional and be able to truly track what we've did and why we've did it and have a purpose to the numbers. So in 2020, we spent about $2,300 on new hire gifts. So for example, when that employee comes in, they have, a tumbler, or they might have a bag, or a City of Westfield pin, whatever the case is, those sort of items. That is something that we are low on from 2020, so we would need to purchase. $2,000 is being conservative. Once again, we spent $2,300 in 2020, but we are willing to kind of be conservative with that. I think there's a lot of different items that we can look at. The last major increase, if you will, $3,000 if you call that major, but is a new initiative, and this is extremely conservative. With having the third person and HR already focusing on employee engagement, which is super important in the day that we live in. People need to feel valued. They need to feel like they can come to work and be safe and be heard. And part of that is investing in them. So once again, we've never intentionally set aside monies in order to have training and development. And I'm not talking about on an individual basis. You'll see in different departments, they might have, training for a certain person or, schooling set aside. That's not what this is regarding. This is as a whole. So for example, lunch and learns, Medicare lunch and learns, retirement lunch and learns. Maybe it's an all-team event. For example, we held one this past summer. It was around $500 just for the food. That's all we bought was just food. Okay, so those are things that we need to have throughout the year, and we want to be intentional with that. So that would give about $375 a quarter, some for engagement, some for training and development. Obviously, we wouldn't spend those exact amounts, but that just gives you a general idea of how conservative we really are being. But it is a top priority for HR. We are in the people business, and so our ultimate goal is to make sure that people feel valued, that when they come to work, they're being heard. Not that we can always fix every situation, but just knowing that we're here for them. So with that, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's getting late. I'm gonna call this meeting to a close if we don't have anything else important. But I got 2 comments, they're not long. I think, this is opinion, we need to have a serious commitment to public safety. Is probably the top of the list. We've got a large list of capital projects. If you look at, there's $187 million worth of capital projects we could fund. Well, those Of course, can't all be done at once. We got State Road 32 coming up. So we've got to do some squeezing to make things fit. We got to protect our cash balance going forward. So it's going to take some squeezing, I think, in certain places to make this thing fit. With that, I'm going to call the meeting to close.